You're listening to Bring Me the Axe. I'm Brian White, and one half of this morbid equation, and I'm joined by my co-host and brother Dave. Hey, Dave, how you doing?
Hello, and thank you for asking me that question. I'm all right. I'm either getting sick, or here's my alternative, and this seems maybe more likely is we put a new boom arm for the mic on the desk, and it required drilling lots of holes because the way the desk is, it doesn't have a clamping space. So I had to get into that like cubby where you stuff all the cords and shit. And it was very difficult. So we had to drill a ton of holes. So I'm like drilling with this giant drill through a ton of like pressed wood. And it's just like shit is flying everywhere. And I must have breathed in a good, I would say 2 pounds of this stuff because I didn't think to cover my face. And so I might have mesothelioma.
Okay. Oh, I was going to ask, like, does this pressed wood have like infectious disease agents?
I mean, I don't think you're supposed to breathe it in. I feel like solids are not the thing you're supposed to be breathing in.
No, that's how you get, what do you call it? Mesothelioma.
That's how. Then now I have it, and this is the end of me.
Or what is it? Pneumonia. Pneumonia is the word I was trying to think.
Okay. I mean, I don't like the sound of either one, but
I
think one seems maybe better than the other.
No good. I'm also a little under the. I think I sound it too. My voice is a little weird tonight. So
well, I also went out last night because we went to just down around the corner from here, and with a friend of mine, and it was this weekend was the head of the Charles Regatta, which is the rowing competition. Big
very Boston thing.
And we also ended up the place that we go to just a couple doors down from here. It was like a zombie pub crawl of all the.
Oh, that sounds annoying.
Of all the bars in the neighborhood that we live in, and it was packed with what I will charitably call assholes. But it was extremely loud, and it required me to yell or at least speak at a very high volume. And I'm not someone who talks a lot.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the thing. Generally. Here's my theory. I don't think you've got mesothelioma. I think you're just shouted out.
Oh.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, it's much better.
Those are different things.
Yeah, your voice will recover, and you won't die.
All right. Well,
no.
I mean, I don't think you can promise that, but I appreciate it.
I had the similar thing. I'm always like a little dragged after a haunt. Last night at Haunted Overload, we had 2,100 people come through.
That's a
lot of people, and I spent the evening like 5 or 6 hours just minute to minute, just leaping out and shouting at everybody and giving them the old booga booga, it's scaring the pants off of them, and I am fucking feeling it. Like after the adrenaline wears off, you feel like hungover and sick the next day, and I felt fucked up today. Like,
well, also at least 10% of those people have COVID. And now you also probably.
The chances are high. Nice. we had a good time. I had several ladies just fully fall all the way down, and as their friends were helping them up to get them past me, I'm pretty sure they were all yelling at me because she was pregnant.
Well, what is she doing
there? To which I asked, what the hell are you bringing a pregnant lady to a notorious scarefest? So.
Also, what did you like? Push her down?
Nope.
I mean, it was just your fault.
Force of personality. I was just that frightening to her.
Oh, pregnant people. You can't say anything in this country anymore.
Can't scare people at Haunted Overload because of woke.
You can't because of woke. People. You can't talk about the border.
So we practically grew up in neighborhood video stores, and the steady diet of utter garbage that those shops provided us with continues unabated to this day. There's no one else I enjoy chopping it up with more about trashy movies than Dave. Just before we get into it, here's a little housekeeping. If you want to keep up with us between episodes, you can also find us on Instagram at Bring Me the Axe Pod. Dave's over there at That Queer Wolf. We have a good time. You should follow us. It's just a suggestion. If you're on the social medias, if you do the Instagram thing, we're a good time. Yep.
You're on TikTok.
I'm on TikTok as well, though I've letting it flounder a little bit. I'm all
just jitterbugging and Charleston-ing.
Yeah, I'm all out of dance moves, so I got to think up new dance moves to do on TikTok.
I'm pretty sure I recycled those ones.
I don't know if we've dug back to the Roaring 20s yet. So
all right.
Look us up by name over there. And if you don't know, we have another show called 99 Cent Rental. But that show is on a bit of a hiatus for the rest of this month while we carry on our spooky season heavy hitters. The last episode we covered is the iconic A Nightmare on Elm Street. And you'll have to listen to the end of this episode to find out what we're covering next. You can also contact us directly at bringmetheaxepod@gmail.com with any questions, comments, or suggestions. Do let us know if there's a movie that you love and would like to hear us give the business. And if you would like to support us on Patreon, you can look us up. Yeah, you can look us up over there at patreon.com/bringmetheaxepod. There's a couple of tiers you can join there. Subscribers at the $5 a month tier can look forward to our bi-weekly X-Files rewatch pod, Do You Think I'm Spooky? As well as my bi-weekly DJ show, Radio Free Haddonfield, on the weeks when Do You Think I'm Spooky is off. You can expect a surprising mixtape of everything from rock to disco to punk. Once again, that's patreon.com/bringmetheaxepod. Yep. And lastly, if you like what you hear, you can subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube now. Search us by name and subscribe if you prefer to consume your podcast that way. And you'll be doing us a favor by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So, I don't know what you're waiting for.
Just get to it.
Do it. It's easy.
Get on. Get on.
Yeah. And if you listen on YouTube, do us a favor. Give the episode a like and leave a comment. We love hearing from you guys. And I just want to get all that out of the way right at the top of the show because, hey, Dave.
Yeah.
Who's this over here?
I think you're referring to our guest. That would be, he's a writer, director, co-editor of the newly published Queer Horror, a Film Guide, and an enthusiastic supporter of queer horror since way back before it was cool. It's Sean Abley.
Hey, Sean.
Hello. Here's my expert medical analysis of both of your ailments. I think you're both being Munchausen by proxy. That's my theory.
We're just gaslighting ourselves into thinking we're sick.
Right. Well, somebody is. Somebody's
possible.
like poisoning you slowly just to make you a little sick. Yeah.
Oh,
I fortunately have very few people in my life who could even do that. So
but do you truly know a person?
That is true.
Right,
that is true.
You don't have somebody who cares enough to try to kill you every day. I'm sorry.
He could be trying to get you back for all the times that you've exposed his greatest fears on this podcast.
Look, what's the point of having a boyfriend if I can't tell you secret things about him?
First, we all find out that he's petrified of the leprechaun and thought that vampires were going to get him when he was a teenager.
Wow, those are good ones. I only thought that my parents were going to kill me.
Oh, boy. Oh, there's many more. There's many more. He's been dragged out into the sun so many times.
Yeah.
Oh,
Poor
Lord.
Michael.
He's a very gentle person, and so I, on the other hand, am not. Clearly,
Is he a horror widow like my husband kind of is?
pretty much.
Yeah.
He had never really seen many horror movies until recently.
Yeah.
Which is great for me.
My husband, he's a genre guy, like he's a comics guy and a gamer and stuff like that, but I'm the horror person. We were sitting around like last year and I decided to watch Terrifier when the first one while he was doing our taxes, and so he was sort of kind of out of the corner of his eye watching, TV. And when I got, of course, the scene where he saws a woman in half, he's like, "What the fuck is that? What are you watching?" So I found his limit.
Yeah. I know where to call it. I mean, I'm not like, hey, we should put on Cannibal Holocaust. But now that I say that, I actually think I did not that long ago. So.
You gotta toughen him up.
Yeah, he's never paying attention anyway.
You really do gotta limit. He's a busy guy.
Yeah.
All right. So, let's give you a little taste of what we're talking about tonight. This is one that I'm very excited to get into. I love this movie.
The house looks just like the one next to it. And the one next to that. And the one next to that. A young couple live in it.
Give Ken a kiss.
You are so obnoxious.
With their 3 children.
Poor Ken. Honey, chew each bite 10 times.
And something more.
They're here. Sweetie, remember last night? Do you remember when you woke up and you said you were here? Uh-huh. Well, who did you mean? Who's here?
TV people.
Something's funny going on here next door. Something,
We were wondering if maybe you had experienced any disturbances lately. What kind of disturbances?
I don't know what hovers over this house. I've never sensed anything like it.
That thing is in there with my baby.
They're hundreds.
Now Steven Spielberg crosses a frightening new threshold into a world within our own. Its form is revealed.
What is it?
Its focus is clear. And the games are over. Poltergeist. It knows what scares you.
Woo!
Hey, how many people do you think went to see this in the theater and then immediately had a seat?
The
I thought it was going to have one on the couch.
The 4K that I have actually has like stickers and warning labels out the ass on it about like, I think the disc actually has an etching on it that's like, do beware, there's a lot of flashing lights in this movie.
I love the fact, now, if you listen to it again, you can't play it back right now, but after this, listen to it again, that trailer where she says, that thing is in there with my baby, and then imagine Lisa Kudrow as Phoebe from Friends saying it, and they would sound it. You won't be able to unhear it. That thing is in there with my baby! Like, poor Joe Beth, isolated, that sounds terrible.
This movie represents a kind of hinge point for me because
Oh, this movie is Poltergeist, by the way.
well, yes, in case you hadn't heard the trailer.
It just seems, let's be
okay,
formal,
yeah.
you know?
This was, I think I was 10 when I saw it, and I watched it on TV with Mom. And this was probably, I mean, apart from the fact that, like, I'd been seeing, watching horror movies on Channel 56 and stuff like that, a Creature Double Feature at the time. Like, this was the first time I think that I actually had, like, express permission to see a movie like this, even though it's rated PG. It's a hard PG rating. Mm-hmm. And there were scenes throughout this movie that absolutely fucking petrified me, and I felt like I had upgraded to, like, a new level, like, watching a guy tear his own face off. Like, I was in the big leagues now. So yeah, I've held this movie very close to my heart ever since. I love Poltergeist.
I think I'm a little older than you because I actually saw it in the theater.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I'm pushing 60. So saw it when it came out in the movie theater. We dressed up because I believe it was a Halloween screening actually. I'd have to look that up though.
All right.
Yeah, and completely terrifying. Like, still to this day, I love this movie. You know, I did a rewatch because I knew we were going to talk about it. And I was like, except for the quibbles that we'll talk about later, I'm like, this holds up as like a fun, scary movie. Like, there's...
I watch it all the time. Like, not all the time, obviously, but like, there's
every
fucking day it's on. No, it's like Halloween with me. Like, I watch it at least once a year. And I feel just as good about it every time I watch it. Like, it's not perfect. It's a little flawed. It feels like a couple of different movies in parts, but, you know, and there's probably a reason for that I'm sure we're going to talk about. But it also is something about, it's an 80s movie that feels very 80s. And it is like arch in a way that, I don't know. I have very warm feelings about that sort of thing.
I was saying just before we started recording that I started this movie feeling pretty ambivalent about it, and I kind of ended in the same place for reasons that we'll get into. I've never been a huge fan of this. I like this movie. Every time I put it on, it's like, yeah, it's a pretty good movie. I mean, I don't have the same warm, fuzzy feelings for it that a lot of people do. I mean, I saw it in the 80s. I'm a child of the 80s. Like, it's not, I have all the things that one would have in order to love this film, and yet something about it just doesn't grab me. I think maybe I liked it more this time around than I usually do.
Yeah.
There's some really great performances in this.
Yeah, there are. And I also I have to admit, like, for some of the movies that we've done in the past that are really rooted in the 90s that we've been like accused of just being kind of mean to, those movies are basically like nostalgia, comfort food for a particular generation. Like this is that for me, but like 10 years prior, you know? So yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I think a lot of the love for this movie comes down to nostalgia because this is the quintessential 80s movie. Like, this is a movie that does not exist without Reagan's America.
True, yeah, because usually the kind of flashpoint for that we have identified several times is 84 specifically. That is the year that the 80s really kind of became the 80s, and everything kind of prior to that sort of felt like the hangover of the 70s still. But even though this movie was produced in 81 and released in 82, it does not feel like, it feels very modern as far as, or rather it feels very 80s, but it's like way ahead of its time.
Yeah, it's a new morning in America. That is the undercurrent of this. And what I do kind of like about that is that the film never comes down on how we should feel about that. Like, there's a lot of commentary in here about commercialism, about consumption, and a lot of like old American fears, but it never tells you how it feels, how Spielberg feels, how Hooper feels. We never know that about it. We never really know how the main characters feel. It's just sort of like, this is the environment into which we enter.
Yeah.
And that's all. It's important, but they're not going to tell us how to feel about that. And I think in the end, you're sort of like, well, it's a pretty progressive stance to be like, probably not a great idea, you know? This excessive sprawl.
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go on.
I would offer also that I don't think Spielberg tells us how to feel about sort of the bigger, social issues of the time. But what I do think he does, and Tobe Hooper does do together, hand in hand, is tell us how to feel about your haunted house. Because the beginning of the film, when the haunting things start happening, they don't go crazy. They don't run out of the house. They actually think it's kind of cool. Like, I
love that part. I absolutely
love that.
adore that. I think that is really also representative of Spielberg's overall feelings about the paranormal, because I don't think that he's ever really been explicit about it. It's probably it was particularly at this time, it was probably very toxic to his career to be like, I love UFOs and ghosts and shit. But he is really keyed in to like contemporary paranormal investigation in a way that I find extremely fascinating, because he is not explicit about it. And Dave actually identified a few players in that world who you can map characters in this movie directly to.
Yeah.
I am
100% like behind you on that. Like when you said those names, I was like, holy shit, you're totally right.
So, my theory is that the three investigators in this, the Dr. Lesh?
Dr. Lesh, yeah.
Beatrice Straight.
And then and then Ryan and the other guy whose name I can't remember. I think that they are based on Thelma Moss, Carrie Gaynor, and Barry Taff.
Yeah, the latter.
Thelma Moss was a teacher at UCLA. She worked
Were
at
all
UCLA.
three of them involved in the Doris Bither case?
Yes.
Okay. That's not good. That's not good at all.
No. Well, no. Thelma Moss immediately walked away from that. She was like, "This is not whatever's happening here is not supernatural, and this woman needs serious help, and we can't exploit that." Barry Taft disagreed with her on that.
It's like, there's a book here, lady.
Because he is a huge fucking hack.
Yeah.
And I don't really know much about Carrie Gaynor other than he was aligned with him. So, but they feel like even physically they sort of look like them.
Yeah.
And I just feel like they're kind of modeled on them. And there's a moment where the two dudes are like talking about, I don't want to say the scientific aspect of paranormal investigation, because there really isn't one, but the maybe more scientific aspect than like the Warrens.
At this time, these were people who were representative of university parapsychology labs. They were trying to find scientific explanations for this.
We'll agree to disagree on that one.
Well, okay, but I believe that at the heart of that, particularly at like the Stanford Research Institute, and I think UCLA also had one. Duke.
That's it. There's 3.
Most of the people whose names you don't hear about because they were writing scientific papers and not fucking paperbacks, they were looking for scientific explanations of what was happening. The people who you've heard of for a reason because they built a reputation off of exploiting, tragedies and mental illness, basically. Yeah.
But where I was going with that is that there's that moment where they're doing that, and I thought, because they're kind of throwing out different like sort of pseudoscientific theory stuff, and I was like, I wonder what extent American audiences would have clocked any of that, because we had just come out of the 70s, and paranormal investigation kind of had its time in the spotlight. By the mid 80s, it was kind of on its way out, pretty much fully on its way out by that point. But I wonder, like, through whether it was daytime TV or People magazine or shit like that.
It had to be something like that, or magazines, because Mom knew a lot about this stuff too.
Well, she's a little new age. I don't know if you know that about
but
her.
Back then she wasn't.
I don't know about that. I think she kind of was. But I just think it's interesting that they would include this bit that feels very authentic to that field, I guess. And expect that people would know what they're doing or talking about.
I think even if there was like a little bit of awareness, thanks to like Phil Donahue and stuff like that, and like People magazine and some of the tabloids, this is like a little bit of inside baseball, because Spielberg also does this on Close Encounters, where like he's even got like J. Allen Hynek in the movie, and like people who unless you are a deep UFO weirdo, you have no idea who these people are.
Man,
yeah.
I guess I'm not a deep UFO weirdo. My gosh.
Oh, I am. See, that's the thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting the perspective you guys bring to this, because I, as a consumer of those like Close Encounters and this film, I distinctly remember the reflexive industries that came up after those films. Like after Close Encounters came out, suddenly it was all about UFOs, right? Like books and magazines. When this movie came out, The Exorcist, like each of these sort of signpost movies about a form of paranormal or mysterious or weird or unknown came out, suddenly there was a flood of books, magazines, articles, reality TV shows, that sort of followed in their wake. I remember, like, as a kid, I had a deck of those, like, ESP testing cards with all the little symbols on them. Like, you could just buy those, and as a kid, I bought them. I was convinced I was psychic, and, we would test each other. So I think it's really... And I think part of that is the fact that these were studio movies that actually had nuance. When you were talking about, like, this movie couldn't exist without Ronald Reagan's America, it also couldn't exist without Steven Spielberg's success, because this was a studio movie, and so there, it had good actors, it had nuanced performances, it had a somewhat nuanced script, and everything that came after this was like paint by numbers, right? Like cashing in on it. This was his passion project, as was Close Encounters, right? So, I mean, you look no further than that title card where it was like a Tobe Hooper film in tiny print, and then a Steven Spielberg production. Like, his name is bigger than the director. So I think that if we're looking at why this film sort of transcends the 80s, it's because it created the mold, right, for everything that would follow. And everything necessarily after that, of course, would be less finely tuned, I guess.
All right, so before we get too far afield here, shall we run down the facts?
We gotta.
So the year was 1982. So here were some other movies that were released that year in 1982. X-Ray was released in 1982.
Yes. Love that movie.
Podcast favorite. Go back and listen to our episode about X-Ray. It's a fucking doozy. And we're joined by Johnny and Eileen from Wiki Horror to talk about that one. Also in 82, we got The New York Ripper from Fulci.
Yuck.
That's a rough one. Have you, from 82, have you ever seen Extro?
Oh my God.
That movie
I think so.
That movie is fucking crazy. It is not the movie you think you're getting.
No. Like in the aftermath of ET, right? Like, because it
Yes.
wasn't the advertising campaign was like, this isn't your, your dad's ET or something to that effect.
Yeah. Let's see. Also that year we had The Dorm That Dripped Blood.
Ugh,
I don't think I've seen that one actually.
it's not good.
No. And then rounding out 82, John Carpenter's The Thing.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Yeah. So we got some cast and crew to discuss. We've got our director, who we mentioned, Tobe Hooper. We
It's
just
our second appearance this month.
third appearance this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm not even a big fan of Tobe Hooper. Here we are covering his oeuvre.
I know, a real Hooper festival this year. We just discussed him at great length in our episode about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. However, because of the sheer power of Steven Spielberg in 1982, a lot of people automatically assumed that he was the movie's director, and there's been a ton of discussion about this over the years about who really directed the movie. It was originally supposed to be a Spielberg movie, but because of some agreement he made with MGM, he wasn't able to helm two movies at once, as this was actively in production at the time of E.T. as well. So Spielberg took a producer role, and he brought it to Hooper to direct off the back of the failed Night Skies project. Because of Spielberg's presence on set and his hands-on nature, people over the years, including members of the cast, told the press that Hooper was just sort of a dummy director and that Spielberg did all the work. But Spielberg himself has, in sort of some ways, kind of
yes and no.
countered this over the years.
There's more of a story to this. So I don't know when you want to get into it, but
Let me sort of finish the initial thought here, and then we can do it. He claims that the movie has a certain Spielberg vibe to it. I think are wildly overstated, as I've noticed a certain vibe about Hooper's films, mostly having to do with the cinematographers that bear a certain resemblance to the same kinds of shots that Spielberg was shooting at the exact same time. And they both have a fondness for golden hour shots, sort of yellow-orange filters.
I think the movie is overtly sentimental in a lot of places, and that's probably why people are like, it's clearly a Steven Spielberg movie, because there are parts where it is very clearly a Steven Spielberg movie.
The Jerry Goldsmith score.
God damn it, that score is so fucking good.
It's so great. It is so great. It is so dynamic, but man, does it nail the Spielberg vibe home.
He got the assignment.
It was also released in 82 at the absolute height of Spielberg's power. Yeah, they called this the summer of Spielberg because this movie came out 2 weeks after E.T. came out. E.T. was a movie that did almost $800 million in box office alone.
Jesus.
Yes, on a $10 million budget. So this is a guy who he basically did the same kind of numbers on Jaws. He does it fucking again, like less than 10 years later. He's just on. Nobody wanted to talk about Tobe Hooper in 82.
No, I was thinking about this earlier because I was like, obviously, Steven Spielberg is in a class almost by himself. The only people I think I could put alongside him are probably Bergman and Hitchcock.
Yeah, and when we were talking about this earlier, I also included George Lucas in the mix simply because Star Wars was on fucking fire at this time. Like, this is peak Star Wars season, and we're about to get Return of the Jedi, and it's just the amount of money that those two guys were generating at Hollywood at the same time was just crazy. It's just that Lucas was a little shy about being in the press. So, which Spielberg definitely seemed to enjoy. Mm-hmm. But yeah, to sort of really drive this home, there is a poster for this very movie that is 80% copy about Steven Spielberg, who, we must remind you, was a producer on this movie and a writer on this movie.
Yeah, it's a 3-paragraph. It's 3 paragraphs of text on the poster.
When we do the taglines for this movie, I almost considered including that because it's technically a tagline. But
you should have.
The shit that I think is funny, our listeners don't think is funny, so I'm not going to push my luck. So here it is. This is my personal theory of this. So I think that Spielberg covered some second unit duties and lent a hand in first unit to help Hooper work out the special effects shots. And I think this is for a couple of reasons. First, Hooper's previous pictures were commonly budgeted around $1 to $2 million and featured just practical special effects work. But this was his first double-digit budget, and his first movie to feature heavy visual effects. And there's a technique and a talent to shooting for special effects that I don't think he had at the time. And so this was the first time that he would be consulting with Industrial Light and Magic to achieve the ambitious visual effects that the movie is known for. And secondly, Spielberg and George Lucas had worked extensively with ILM in the last several years to create and hone entirely new systems for creating special effects. Spielberg had firsthand experience with a lot of these shots, since many of them bore a very direct. A lot of the special effects in this movie look like Raiders of the Lost Ark. Mm-hmm. You know, and so I think that because of his presence on set, having a direct hand in setting up special effects shots, to people who are just milling about cast and shit, who are just kind of paying attention when they have to, it kind of looks like Steven Spielberg is directing this movie.
Do you want to know kind of more about how this worked?
Give it to me.
So the cast mostly sided with Hooper because that was who they were mostly familiar. Zelda Rubinstein did not. She was a big Spielberg fan.
All right. Zelda Rubinstein's also in this movie for 15 minutes, and it's the most heavily special effects laden scenes.
She's amazing.
She's fucking amazing. I've got nothing but great words to say about her.
So what it seems like what happened was, so yes, Steven Spielberg is very actively involved in the production of this movie. He was there almost every day, with the exception of a 3-day vacation. And it seems like he probably unintentionally just kind of kept sort of maybe pushing Tobe Hooper out of the way, mostly because of his enthusiasm for it. It doesn't seem like it was something he did.
That's the thing.
Purpose.
I fucking love Spielberg for that. I can't really find a bad thing to say about him, simply because he's a guy who just loved making movies to a fault.
But like, he did at least half of the storyboarding for this. Some people say all of it.
That I am sure of.
Some people say all of it. Other people are a little more honest and say, no, Tobe Hooper did it about as much as Spielberg did. But what really happened was there was probably a couple, I had the article pulled up a while ago. I closed it for some reason. It was like maybe 4 months before the movie came out, 4 to 6 months. The LA Times published an article called like Poltergeist, Who Really Directed It? And which is like such a fucking shitty headline, but they published this thing where it is very heavily implied that, Spielberg is kind of acting as a shadow director on this. And because he had also done this before on that movie Used Cars.
Oh,
that
no
Robert
shit.
Zemeckis did like a year or two before this. So it was so bad to the point where Kurt Russell finally called him out for it and was like, hey man, I can only take direction from one person. You guys decide who that's going to be, but we can't keep doing this. And so Spielberg backed off and finally, the Zemeckis took over. The article was called Poltergeist, Whose Film Is It? Which, again, I think that's even shittier, actually.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
So he visits the set, and he talks to all the people involved, and he goes back and publishes this article in which it is very heavily implied that this is Steven Spielberg directing this movie. And so he quotes one of the United Artists execs as saying, both people were on the set all the time, and Tobe was very much involved as far as I could tell. But Steven was the creative force, in my opinion. His stamp is on the film, even though there was a good, solid, competent director there. It's a little backhanded.
Yeah.
Frank Marshall, again, he's quoted very heavily, and he's the producer. He says the creative force in this movie was Steven. He did the design for every storyboard, and he was on the set every day. And so they just keep quoting all these people that kind of reinforce this idea that, like, this is just sort of like a backdoor way to let Steven Spielberg off the hook with the DGA, who ultimately did open an inquiry into this to determine who really directed this film, because they would have been in violation otherwise. And they concluded that it was Tobe Hooper who did, in fact, direct the movie. And so there's just this weird tension where it's Steven Spielberg and it's a horror movie. And like, it seems like the mythology blew up so much around it that there's no way to tell the truth from half truth and fiction. And so, but it seems like they mostly just kind of did it together. And I think for the most part, you can see their strengths are really complementary.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when they don't complement each other, it is very, very apparent. Yeah. See the ending of this movie.
I think it's important to remember also, general America didn't have access to what it meant to make a movie like they do today. Like, things like Entertainment Weekly and stuff, Premiere Magazine, they sort of dismantled movie making so people had a little bit more knowledge. So what people were getting were reports that were describing a process that they didn't understand, right? And so the fact that, like, if you know anything about how movies are made now, that yes, there's a director, but he's working with a team of people. The producer's always on the set. Like, that is normal for, like, a creative producer to be there if they shepherded this project. You're consulting with like, if there's a heavy special effects movie, special effects, the person heading that team will actually direct that sequence. Like, this is not an anomaly. So, but because there was, blowing the lid off the story of this movie was something that was kind of unique at the time, I think it got blown out of proportion. The other assumption is that Tobe Hooper didn't want Steven Spielberg's help. Like, Tobe Hooper had been working in low budget and he'd done Salem's Lot by this point, but now he's working for a big studio. He's got a very enthusiastic person who's done all this stuff already. Who's to say that Tobe Hooper didn't, like, appreciate Steven Spielberg storyboarding some of the shots with him? Like, there's, in the aftermath, unfortunately, Steven Spielberg, like, on the opening weekend, did that open letter, which sadly, just like,
that is the most passive aggressive shit I've ever heard.
It truly is. And that, to me, that's the problem, right? It's not that maybe they made this movie together or Steven Spielberg had a heavy hand. Who cares at the end of the day? It's
right. It worked in their favor originally.
Both of them got a huge fucking hit movie on their hands, and what they did afterwards, is up to them. And if, Tobe Hooper did not live up to his, potential after that, if it was revealed in his subsequent films that, how could he have possibly done this because his subsequent work is this stuff, you know what I mean? Like, who the fuck cares? Like, it was a thing that we wouldn't even talk about today. When there's movies like Brian Fuller literally leaving the set of an X-Men movie and other people directing it for him, and we know that and don't care. Like, this just seems to be fun lore that we can examine with our microscopes and try to figure it out. But, at the end of the day, I don't know. I just love the movie, and I think it's a fun footnote.
It would be a non-story if it didn't involve Spielberg.
Well, I think that's the issue, is that because it did, and I think, Sean, you're right. I think it's very much an issue of people saw this successful horror movie, and they thought, well, this fucking Texas Chainsaw guy couldn't have possibly pulled this off on his own. He's just some shitty horror director. It had to have been Steven Spielberg.
Right.
I think there was a lot of that to it as well.
And I think that's not unfounded, quite frankly. There's a scope to this movie that is not found in Salem's Lot.
No.
You know what I mean?
I believe that I think there are probably two reasons why Steven Spielberg was very active. One is that I think it really was he felt like it was his project. And so it was very hard for him to not keep jumping in. But I also suspect that the studio was probably like, hey, Spielberg, get in there and kind of shepherd this guy who's, he's not an unknown quantity, but he almost is, because he had done Texas Chainsaw, some other shit nobody saw, and then Salem's Lot, which was a television film. And the fact that they're like, we're not going to just hand over a summer blockbuster to some guy.
True. There are also glimmers of Spielberg in this movie that I find unmistakable. Like, it is the sort of casual chaos that happens in the background of all the family scenes.
Yes.
You see this in Jaws. You see this in Close Encounters, where like the main player's family it's always these two like feral children who are just like going insane in the background. There's like, it's not so much in here as it is a little bit on the margins, like at the very in the beginning where the guy's like trying to get the beer to the football game, and there are just these malicious children with radio controlled cars trying to fuck with him.
It's like the mundanity of life. Like it's that.
Yeah.
Right. And Tobe Hooper never directed that. Like that, all of his movies are it is a task-oriented scene, right? This person has a chainsaw. This person does not want to be chainsawed. Like, and so now we're in a movie where a family thinks it's funny that their house is haunted. Like it's a completely different tone that I think, again, it wasn't until that letter that he released on opening night that if it were not for that letter, I would think, well, maybe they're cool with it. Maybe they're fine. Like,
And I think they were. I think they were until that happened. And then Hooper was like, hey, man, fuck you.
right.
I thought we were doing this together.
Yeah. I thought we were bros, man. Yeah. Let's talk about the cast a little bit because we got a great cast here. And, despite the fact that I'm only going to mention 3, but we'll give shout outs to a few people at the end. We've got Heather O'Rourke. The 3 Poltergeist movies are the only features that she ever did, but she did quite a bit of television in the years leading up to her death. Did you know she had a recurring role on Happy Days?
Sure did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the later
like
seasons.
the final 2 seasons, she was like a returning character.
When they were trying everything.
Well, because look, little Richie Cunningham had gone off to school. You had to do something.
Yep, couldn't bring back Chuck. They had to turn to the tried and true cute kid character.
Cousin Oliver, all over.
Yep, all over. They never learn. In early 1988, Heather suddenly fell ill, which quickly led to her having a heart attack, from which she died and was revived from. She then underwent surgery for a congenital condition which narrowed her intestines critically, caused bowel ruptures, but then she suffered another heart attack while in recovery and died.
Yeah, they originally, I think, thought that she'd been misdiagnosed with Crohn's, which is why they hadn't caught or treated any of this other stuff.
Oh, so fucking sad.
Which is pretty tragic.
Yeah, but I mean, it was like a birth defect, just something she'd always had. Man, what a bummer.
She was like on the verge too, right? Like she had done these 3 movies and was on one of the most popular TV shows at the time, and then it was over.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if you've ever watched the documentaries about when they were filming the 3rd one, it destroyed the director of that movie when she died. He was like, I don't even want to put this movie out.
Well, she looks ill. I mean, in that movie, let's be honest, she does not look well.
I think it was her parents that were like, look, you would be doing our daughter a disservice if you did not finish this thing that you all worked on together. And so he was like, all right, then we will sally forth. But it was, it's very moving, very touching the way that he felt about it. It was just like, I don't want to finish this now.
Yeah, that's tough, man. We've also got JoBeth Williams, who is arguably best known for her role in this very movie. Though she does appear prominently in Kramer vs. Kramer as Dustin Hoffman's girlfriend, one of the primary boomers sharing their existential dread in The Big Chill, and in the Richard Pryor, Gene Wilder movie Stir Crazy. Did you know Sidney Poitier directed that?
Stir Crazy?
Stir Crazy?
Yeah.
I didn't.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think JoBeth Williams is the MVP of this film.
She is.
I would agree.
She is the anchor.
Yep,
Because she is orbited by wild, strange characters and manages to ground the whole thing.
I think she makes weird choices in certain parts, but overall she feels very authentic. I think she and Craig T. Nelson have incredible chemistry.
I love them in this movie. I think that's a reason why I keep coming back to this is they are such likable parents. Mm-hmm. And they feel like real parents too. They feel like they are directly and actually authentically related to these children.
Yeah, you believe that they are in love with each other.
Yeah.
They really sell it.
And it's those scenes of them just fooling around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That just they go filmmakers. They just throw a few minutes of your sort of relationship characters just having a good time.
Yeah. She's also the hero. She runs toward danger. She saves her kid. Everything good that happens in the movie, she is the agent of. And
I don't know. She makes some pretty questionable choices at the end.
I disagree.
Haunted, horrible house. But hey, kids, go lay down in the worst part of the house.
Hey,
she was told the house was clean.
Yeah,
I was going to say,
tired.
Gina Barrett's told her the house was clean. Yeah. Also, she was probably very tired.
Most of the reviews of this movie, single her out as one of the things that is most successful.
Damn.
And a few of them even mention they're just of course she did this at the end. She's exhausted.
Yeah.
You could also point to her as another piece of evidence for Spielberg because he's all about the moms, right? He's about the tough moms, the strong moms, and Tobe Hooper inventing the final girl. So now they're sort of melding together. She's not a final girl in this, but she certainly has the final girl energy of the the person defeating the bad thing and being put through the effing ringer. And as I will say, as a confused teenage boy, I'm a firm Kinsey 6 now, but back then I was a little more questionable. I'll be the the pig who says it, her rolling around in the room in the football jersey and underpants made me feel certain things.
I hate that scene in this movie.
Oh, it's so. I mean, it's obviously directed by a man. Like this movie is directed by a man when she has to spend the last, the middle third of the movie in her underwear.
Yeah.
But she was a sexy lady at the time.
It's a beautiful woman. So rounding out our cast, we've got Zelda Rubinstein, 4 feet 3 inches tall. If you needed an outrageous little lady to play an outrageous part, you hired Zelda. As distinct a character as Carol Ann, she left an equally large impact on pop culture in the early 80s thanks to this
I would
role.
argue bigger than Carol Ann.
Carol Ann, the whole "they're here" thing was so fucking ubiquitous at the time.
I know. But
Yeah.
I think she left a more lasting impression. She's a very odd character.
She is,
From the
and I
moment she
love
shows
her.
up on screen, she is bizarre, and she plays it in such a weird way. Like, why does she have a Southern accent? Who knows?
Did she not have a Southern accent?
No, she's from like Philadelphia.
Oh, all right.
So she also, shortly after this, became a really vocal
I was about to
activist,
mention
AIDS
this.
activist.
Yeah, a very good friend of hers apparently died in 83 or 84, and she just took up the cause. Of this, she said, "I knew it was not the kind of disease that would stay in anybody's backyard. It would climb the fences, get over the fences into all of our homes. It's not limited to one group of people," she said.
God damn it.
Yeah.
What a hero.
Yeah, to her detriment, unfortunately.
Yes, unfortunately, yes, she did think that it probably did affect her career negatively. I mean, this is at a time when, people wouldn't even go near patients in hospitals, so they're certainly not going to hire an activist.
Yeah.
I just realized this movie has 2 catchphrases, and I think hers wins.
That's what I'm saying.
Go to the light, Carol Ann, and they're here. Like, I think go to the light, Carol Ann wins in the public consciousness of something we still use.
Yeah. They're here is the thing that, like, in the 80s, if in anything happened in a movie made after this, or on a TV show after this, or even
In a
just
fucking Pepsi commercial.
in fucking conversation, if something spooky happened, somebody would turn invariably and go, "They're here," if they weren't singing the Twilight Zone theme,
And think they're so clever. That's the worst part about the non-horror people, when they quote the horror, they think they're so effing clever.
Yeah. Yep. So we do have taglines. Speaking of "they're here," "they're here" is one of them. It's not bad. It's all right. And lastly, I think this also appeared as a sort of like a secondary tag. "It knows what scares you."
Yeah, they're both on the same poster.
Yeah. I looked for others because, when I always turn to IMDb to see, and there's like a fucking dozen of them. And it's like, I think some of these have just like appeared on videotapes and like fan posters and stuff like that. Because there's approximately, there's another?
There is one more, and it is the first real ghost story.
Huh. All right.
Which I think is a very interesting tagline.
So you're for my clarification, you're saying taglines don't have to be spoken in the film. I guess I'm saying catchphrases. If I said tagline earlier, I meant catchphrase.
Oh, no. Yeah, no. Well, we always single out a couple of taglines of shit that appears on posters, but but yeah, no. These are also like "they're here" is like the catchiest of catchphrases. Yeah. So yeah, with a budget of $10 million, this movie pulled down 120 in box office and left a massive impression on American pop culture. That is absolutely fucking crazy. This was the summer of Spielberg as a result of that. So yeah. It spawned 2 sequels of predictably degrading quality. Poltergeist 2 dropped in 1986, features some really wild set pieces. Unfortunately, it's a much more conventional horror movie, and landing where it did in the 80s, there was a pressure to establish a franchise villain in Henry Kane, the mad cult leader who appears again as the main antagonist in Poltergeist 3 from 1988. Poltergeist 3 has sort of undergone some recent rediscovery that I very seriously disagree with.
That movie is fucking terrible.
It is not good. It is
It
so
has
not
Tom
good.
Skerritt in it. How are you going to replace Craig T. Nelson with Tom Skerritt?
I know. Oh, and I didn't mention our side players. Craig T. Nelson, also really good. I love him. But let's not forget our friend James Karen shows up in this movie.
Ah, God, I love James Karen so much.
And he's even a little hysterical and freaked out at the end. Just Guy had a speed, and man, did it work for him.
Love him. He never got the credit he was due.
James Cameron, you fucking rule. To the people out there trying to tell me that Poltergeist is 3, I just got one thing to say to you. Stop it. Just stop it.
Yeah, stop being 24 years old and just now discovering 80s horror movies.
Poltergeist 3 is like 2 seconds away from being Poltergeist in space. Like, I feel like it's that bad.
It's just so bad, man. They tried, and like you were talking about, that director, I feel for him, man. Like, to have to make a movie with like an actively dying child, man, what a fucking bummer.
Oh my God. Oof. Putting it that way, that sounds a lot less fun.
I know. And part 2, the actor who I'll mention this when I'll put it aside. We'll mention that when I talk about the Curse of Poltergeist. In 2015, there was a remake that I'm fairly certain nobody watched. I've never heard so much as a single comment about it. Not once. I forget that it even exists.
I think one of the people that was in it got murdered by an axe murderer.
I doubt
which
it.
is insane. No, it really happened.
Wait, what?
Yeah, it was like a home invasion gone horribly wrong.
Oh my God, the curse is real. I was about to sit here and fucking discount the whole thing.
Yep.
Oh, Jesus. I thought you were joking.
No, I would never joke about axe murder.
No, axe murder is serious business. Also, there was a TV series, I believe, that ran on Showtime that was called Poltergeist: The Legacy.
Oh, yeah.
It is as much a Poltergeist show as the Friday the 13th show is related to Friday the 13th. Yeah.
Wasn't that
It's
Helen
not
Shaver?
bad.
Was that Helen Shaver?
Yes. It's not terrible. I have watched it in the last couple of years.
But it just has that look to it, though, that that era, that like from like 87, 88 to like 93, 94, everything looks like it was shot on the cheapest fucking video they could find.
I was about to say 100% shot on video. It is it's such a bummer. But
and in Canada, also shot on video in Canada.
Yes. Yep. But if you can look past it, it's not bad. You know, it has a really slow start, but it picks up. I think there's like
it's right up there with like Monsters and like all those shows that were like weird horror shows. Where we're like, where did these even air?
Tales from the Dark Side.
Tales from the Dark Side.
Friday the 13th. Yeah, we mentioned that one.
War of the Worlds was another one. I loved War of the Worlds. Unbelievably gory syndicated TV show.
The reboot of Outer Limits was one of those.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
But yeah, this is when we also get like Dark Shadows, and it's like, nobody wanted this. Stop doing this.
Yeah. So this movie got an R rating when it went before the MPAA. Spielberg Productions were really pushing the limits of what could pass for PG at the time, ultimately resulting in the PG-13 rating, but that would not happen until 1984. Until that time, Spielberg was such a force in Hollywood that he could just call his own shots. It sounded like his appeal to the MPAA was basically him just going, come on!
Come on, it's me, it's Stevie! Come on!
Yeah, and then he got his way. A man tears his own face off in this movie, and it is a PG-rated movie. Mm-hmm. Yep. And lastly, this is one of Hollywood's cursed movies, but the curse is rather overstated, if you can say as much. The deaths associated with this movie, while tragic, were all quite normal, with one tragic exception, and many of them took place years or months after the movies had wrapped. Heather O'Rourke's death was due to a birth defect, as we mentioned. She managed to film 3 Poltergeist movies before the curse got her, so meh. Julian Beck, who played Henry Kane in Part 2, was diagnosed with a form of cancer in 1983. Again, he was dying as they were making the movie. That's why he has that fucking look about him.
Yeah, that's kind of why they cast him a little bit.
He used that look to his advantage, and people remember him for it, man. He is a frightening dude in that movie.
Also, he was a very, very strange man.
Really? Yeah. I don't know anything about him, I don't think.
He was like part of, I think he led a theater group.
Yes, he and Judith Malina, who I believe is also in one of these films. I'm going to get the name wrong. I don't think it was the Worcester Group. It was one of those experimental theaters in New York that did things like Dionysus in 69 and Marat Sade and We're All Nude, that kind of thing.
Yeah, he was a very sexy man. Yeah. Like he and his girlfriend would often entertain thirds and fourths.
Yeah. So they had lovers, did they?
They did indeed. He was quite openly bisexual, which was odd for the time.
Give me some of that. Willem Dafoe was also part of that theater company.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
BT Dubs, yeah.
He was probably the star of that theater company.
Right. Yep. We've also got, let's see, Will Sampson, who plays the mystical, magical Native American in part 2. He died during surgery, I think like years after the movie came out.
It was a couple of years, but yeah, it was like a lung transplant. I'm like, I think it was like a double lung transplant or something. The survival rate was very, very low. At that point, just die.
I know. Well,
I mean, come on. Somebody else could use those. Come on, Stevie. Come on.
So, yeah, while these are all tragic as death tends to be, natural or otherwise, the one truly tragic death of the movie's legacy is that of Dominique Dunn, who plays a teenage daughter, Dana Freeling. Not long after the movie's release, she broke up with her boyfriend at the time, who later returned to her house and strangled her to death.
And got 3 years in jail
for it. I could not. Actually, I can kind of believe that. Fucking
yeah.
So
yeah, they framed like his defense was like it was a crime of passion. It's like no, he was a sack of shit who was abusing her from like day one.
Yeah.
That's not a crime of passion, but also the better part of the story is that he ended up he was like a chef or something like that. So he gets out of jail and goes and gets like a job at some big fancy LA restaurant where he's like the head chef or whatever they call themselves. And her family showed up every day with signs that were like the so-and-so, I can't remember the guy's name, murdered our daughter and works at this restaurant, to the point where he got fired for it and had to like change his name because they followed him everywhere.
Good. Fuck that guy.
It really was sort of the first like celebrity, like actual like consequence of like fame and obsession, right? Like
it's a weird one. Who was the Darlene?
I was about the woman that Star 80 is about.
Yeah, Darlene.
Yeah,
true. Begins with an S. I can't remember her last name. Something. But yeah, she was a Playboy model, and I think she had moved into film after that.
Dorothy Stratton. Dorothy Stratton.
Dorothy Stratton. Yes.
Who also starred in Galaxina.
Yep.
Yes.
And also Rebecca Schaefer from the Sam and Me.
That was a couple years later, though, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was like stalking became kind of big, like, because this was also around the time that what's her name from Friday the 13th? Well, and from Friday the 13th, what's her name?
God, Adrienne King had
had a really bad stalker.
Yep.
But yeah, it's really shitty the way that a lot of this stuff was framed because the police didn't do. I mean, on one hand, there isn't much they can do until someone does commit a crime, but on the other hand, it's like someone can and should do something, and they didn't. They were just like, you shouldn't have done that. 3 years in jail for you, sir.
I know.
Oh, my sister Sam. I have to correct that. It wasn't Sam. My sister Sam.
Yep. You got any reviews for this?
I actually have a lot because I think most people remember this movie being wildly successful critically, and for the most part, it was. But not everybody.
But Gene Siskel got his hands on it.
Nope. We'll get to that. Don't worry. We're gonna get to both of them in a minute. What I found interesting, because it was so well reviewed for the most part, I looked for things that I thought were more interesting about what people thought of it. So this is from the Boston Globe. Poltergeist also deals with the nightmare of the kind of futuristic American suburbia that is all too recognizable and familiar now. The film's resonant imagery deals with the kind of pseudo-events that characterize so much of suburban and even suburban, I mean peri-urban, I think, life. The ritual of TV watching, beer drinking, and the eating of fast food breakfasts on a Formica-topped table. Why I pulled that was that I think this is a thing a lot of people kind of keyed into and thought, I think it's why the movie really resonated with them, is that it's the sentiment, maybe not even sentimentality, it's the recognizable nature of just sort of everyday life, that this is really the first major movie, I would say, that deals with ghosts in a way that is not a gothic horror. There's no mystery to be solved here. This is America. This is typical American life.
It is a very clinical haunted house movie.
Yep. And so I think that is the first time anyone had really seen, like, this is just, the Entity came out before this, didn't it?
I believe that's in 81.
But that wasn't
Amityville Horror is in like 79, I think.
And the Entity is a different story, but Amityville is such an unbelievable story, and it doesn't feel like, I mean,
that one definitely.
They never feel like a modern couple.
No, that one definitely has like gothic horror trappings about it. You know.
The difference is in Poltergeist, we see what they lose. Like they establish the family, and then we see what they lose. In Amityville Horror, we don't really see what they lose. Like we see
and you don't you don't particularly like them in Amityville Horror.
They do nothing to like. I mean, I had a bone for the lead, but as I did with Poltergeist, with Craig T.
James
Nelson.
Brolin is a handsome man.
James Brolin
devastating.
remains a handsome man.
Yeah, he still is a handsome man.
He's one of those guys who, like, God damn it, how are you holding on like
I
this?
know.
It's like Pierce Brosnan, like a guy so handsome it makes you angry.
And he's this close to Barbara Streisand. Actually, he's this close to Barbara Streisand. Yeah. So all gay points.
But I think that it's interesting that that's what so many people picked up on. And I will go on in just a minute with these, but I think it's really important to point out that what was happening at this time in this country. So people were a little bit concerned about like this suburban sprawl and like what it meant to no longer live sort of on top of each other in cities, but to have a lot of space and to take up a lot of space that had previously been allocated for other things. So it's at this time, maybe in the late mid 70s and early 80s, we get people voicing concerns about what would eventually lead to the Native American Graves Act.
Oh, yeah.
And that is the one that says, if it is found that you have bodies buried on your property, you cannot just build over it. You have to, set up a survey, and like they have to dig it up. They have to relocate, repatriate. And so that was on a lot of people's mind, this idea of the past. And I think that's the original, like, it's one of the oldest American fears, is this idea that the past will somehow come back to claim what it's owed, or to kind of get revenge for, the wrongs that they had been dealt. That's similar feelings about that's we still deal with it now. It's what motivates a lot of racism. And so I think you see that throughout this movie, and that's what a lot of critics pick up on as well, is this feeling of how the past can come in and take away things that are so precious to you, like in this case, the child, or can destroy the house or the family somehow. But not everybody liked the movie. And I think this is, so I was like, I kind of am interested in the people who didn't like it. My boy, Vincent Canby, who I unfortunately seem to agree with a lot more than I thought. He says the structure, so he did kind of like it, but he says the structure of the film is not perfect. It seems to have two endings. This isn't because there are two, but because the film's exorcism rite is so spectacular that one really isn't prepared for still another confrontation, which doesn't quite measure up to the first one. I always, somehow always agree with Vincent Canby.
I say the same fucking thing. I always go, God damn it, when you say Vincent Canby, and then you read his review, and I go, well, he's not wrong.
Nope.
Oh,
I disagree. This movie should have ended. This was 20 minutes earlier.
I completely disagree. I think you're set up for that second ending, but I'm not going to fight Vincent Canby.
But it does, like, I think he's on to something where it's like, you give us this big, spectacular finale, and then there's sort of this coda where you're like, I guess.
Yeah.
Sure, if we're still here in the theater, why not?
It is where all the social activism takes place, is that third act.
Yes. So LA Times, after all their shit stirring and hand wringing, they didn't even like the fucking movie. So this is Sheila Benson from the LA Times. If the special effects are good, and they are, and the characters are not stupid, and they're not, then why is Poltergeist borderline resistible? Because it's simply a bump in the night movie. An epic bump in the apocalyptic night, to be sure, but it doesn't touch our humanity, and it doesn't even always make good sense. I find that a very strange review, because it is an extremely sentimental movie.
I think that it succeeds on those merits. Like,
Yeah.
how do you watch this movie and come to that conclusion?
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, she conflates two things. She conflates touching on our lives as human beings, and it doesn't make sense. Point B, I completely agree with her on.
Yes,
and I'm assuming
absolutely.
we'll talk about that later. But point A, she's totally wrong, and I think she's trying to like combine them to make
A
her
little
point.
bit. And I will say, I it's not out of context, but I will give you the full context of her review, is that she's really coming at this as a woman and as a mother. And so why she thinks this doesn't make sense, and why it sort of like doesn't really move her, is that she can't connect with a character who seems to go through the entire movie as this sort of fierce protector of her children, and then in the end becomes so relaxed about it. Like, even though they say like the house is clean, still you'd think, I don't fucking care. We're getting out now.
I get that. There would just knowing how this sort of shit works, there would be a sort of trauma that keeps her like they would sleep with all of their children in the same room.
And she literally says that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think she's a little upset that like it's a spooky movie that really pulls its punches.
Yeah. Okay.
Now we're getting to our boys. I'm going to start with Gene Genie at the Chicago Tribune. Poltergeist is very good at getting the details of suburban life right. In other words, it sets the stage beautifully. But when it comes time for the terror to begin, the whole thing is very, very silly.
I can't disagree.
I mean, I sort of am like, I guess so. Some of it doesn't really work anymore. But he's particularly critical of the movie in a way that's like, oh, you just don't like horror movies. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, because also this is him peak Crusade. Like 82 is like the big year for slasher movies. He is probably on guard because anything.
Yes, he's like, here's Heather O'Rourke's address. Go murder her for being in this movie.
So yeah, I guarantee he's just on guard because he's just anything that's got a little bit of scent of horror about it. He's like ready to just chop it to pieces.
And finally, Roger Ebert, Chicago Sun-Times. But Poltergeist is an effective thriller, not so much because of the special effects as because Hooper and Spielberg have tried to see the movie's strange events through the eyes of the family members instead of just standing back and letting the special effects overwhelm the cast along with the audience. He actually really liked it. And I hope that caused a rift between the two of them, that they got into that petty squabbling that they used to do.
Yeah.
Where they were basically just like slap fight one another. So it's an interesting mix. A lot of people sort of felt, this is why I think at the time it wasn't viewed the same way we view it now, because I think a lot of people have a lot of sentimental attachments to it now. But it's a lot of like, yeah, it's a big budget spooky horror movie. It's impressive in certain places. It's very well made. It's fun. What else do you want? Like that's kind of the consensus. Is like, just go see the fucking movie. It's fine.
Yeah. It's a summer movie.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, shall we get into this proper?
Let's hear all about it.
All right. So we open on the end of broadcast reel for a TV channel in extreme close-up. Now,
Remember when it used to go off the air, when TV went off the air?
I'll bet you about half of our listeners do, and the others are like, TV used to go off the air?
They're like, now what is a TV?
Right. There wasn't TV after midnight. Yeah.
So that's like a bigger computer then?
Yeah. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this, TV networks used to go off the air very late at night. They it required people to be in the actual studio, like running shit, and people got to go home. So they would cease to broadcast, and many of them did so with a reel of patriotic images set to the national anthem.
Which I think is a really, really great way to open this movie, because like I said, this movie doesn't exist without that Reagan-era patriotism, that idea of this is the new America. So to open with the national anthem is very bold.
Yep. So we pull back to the dimly lit living room of a suburban home.
This is where I have my first seizure.
Yeah. First of all, I love the flickering effect. I think it is outstanding. There is a look about this movie's like spooky shit that I go nuts for.
And I think that's Hooper.
Yes, I agree.
Because it
100%.
reminds me.
You know what it reminds me
of? That scene in Funhouse.
I was about to say the fan scene in Funhouse. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So
which is a really cool fucking scene.
Yep.
Isn't that where Lars Woodruff gets hers? Largo Woodruff?
Yes.
Yep.
I stalked her on the internet the other day. Speaking of stalk, well, I found her.
Oh, great. Then I went to her house.
I did not do that.
Just like Roger Ebert told me to.
So, Dad's passed out in a chair in front of the TV. We follow the dog around to the different bedrooms as he embarks on a series of hijinks.
I love E-Buzz.
But this is a device that cleverly introduces us to the Freeling family. Mother Diane, daughter Dana, son Robbie, and their youngest daughter Carol Ann. Dad, by the way, is Steve.
Mm-hmm.
So Carol Ann,
Steve and Diane. Yeah. That's like the most American white people names I could come up with.
I know, it's almost like a John Mellencamp song.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Carol Ann wakes up, ambles down to the living room where the TV static flashes ominously. She sits down in front of the TV and has a conversation with something that we can't see or hear. But
she's going to give us the idea of like, how should we interpret this entity or whatever? Because she approaches it with, I mean, I don't like kids in movies. I don't like kids in general, but I don't like them in movies either. But she has such like childlike wonder and delight.
I don't see. Also, I'm with you. I think that it is dicey territory whenever you involve children below a particular age because they're just reciting lines. She's remarkably capable.
Yeah, in a weird way.
In a weird way, you know.
Hey, you've seen Terrifier 3, right?
I have not seen Terrifier 3 yet.
Get back to me on the use of children in horror movies after you see Terrifier 3.
So when she loudly demands that the other party talk louder, the entire family wakes up and comes downstairs as she talks it out with the ghost in the TV, placing her hands on the screen.
Isn't this where the spirit actually comes out of the TV and infests itself into the wall?
That's a little later on.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it does this, I think it's either this scene or the next time she does it where like a little wisp comes out of the TV and sort of goes towards Coach.
Yeah. So we cut to a panning shot of the neighborhood of cookie cutter houses in Simi Valley, California, set to the lilting tones of Jerry Goldsmith's awesome score.
And again, he understood the assignment fucking perfectly. Like this opening theme, and this is I think the main theme, it is tranquil, it is sleepy, it's really unintrusive. Like it sells the idea that the suburbs are this very kind of placid place and you don't have to worry about anything really because it's just so calm everywhere.
Yep. Kids be out there in the neighborhood riding bikes, including a middle-aged man who awkwardly tries to balance a case of beers. That's Dirk Blocker, who you might recognize from Prince of Darkness, or more recently as Hitchcock, the sloppy moron cop from Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Well, he's a sloppy bike rider in this one.
He is. Yep. Some neighborhood kids harass him with RC cars, causing him to drop the beers. He rushes inside the Freeling house into a living room of rowdy adults watching a football game.
And again, this is where we're going to get that feeling of like, this is middle America, where everything is mom is in the kitchen doing her chores, and dad is with the boys.
With the boys.
It's the beginning of My Hungry Guys. It's the beginning of the conceit.
Yep.
But like then you even get the kids where like the daughter. Why is Dominique Dunn even in this fucking movie?
I don't know. Her involvement is very weird, and the fact that she is significantly older than the other kids is really just strange to me. I think they have to say, because of that, they have to say, oh, we had our first child when we were like 15. It's like, well, that's an odd thing to include in a movie in 1982. I know. I don't know. Because mostly like the parts that I do remember her is just like weird comic relief one-offs.
Yeah, she serves a very strange purpose in this film, and one that I don't necessarily like because it's a little bit gross.
She's literally there to provide a moment in the trailer.
Yeah,
like literally, like her basically her final moment in the film is literally like her part is crafted so she quote doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So why is she there?
Yeah, she's the dumb older sister, I guess, but she's there in this scene eating a salad. And later on, she will show up eating a stick of celery. And I'm like, oh, right, because girls don't want to be fat. Because it's 82 or whatever.
At a key moment in the game, the channel suddenly swaps over to Mr. Rogers. Turns out that Steve's remote is on the same frequency as his neighbor's, and this happens a lot. So there's a confrontation. Which
is incredible because even the remote control frequencies are identical.
Yes. Yeah. Because basically they're like, I can't remember if these houses are supposed to come furnished or something like that. Like if that's the draw is like,
I don't think so. Cause he shows one later on and it's empty.
Yeah.
Do you think that's truly the remotes, or do you think that's like the beginning of the house? Like
it's the remotes because he's doing it to their TV.
Interesting.
Right. Yeah.
Because they're both doing it to each other because he keeps turning it back. And then Mr. Rogers comes on, and it's like, but when Mr. Rogers shows up, they're all like, "Wait, who is this?" And it's like that show started in like 1959 or something like that.
I know, like literally everybody knows who Mr. Rogers is.
Yeah.
Who the fuck is this guy? No idea.
Meanwhile, Diane helps Carol Ann bury their pet parakeet.
Because she finds her, she's about to flush it down the toilet. Hey, lady, you can't flush animals down the toilet. You can't even put paper towels in the toilet.
Yeah, real chaotic picture of suburbia. There's sprawling tracks of just hyper development that were popping up more and more commonly in America at the time. Robbie occupies himself climbing the tree that's located just outside his window. It's a real nasty piece of set decoration, completely without foliage, as an ominous bank of clouds roll in. Now, this was a major piece of special effects work that was synonymous with Industrial Light and Magic. It's called the Cloud Tank.
It doesn't look as impressive in 4K.
I think it does.
It looks very fake.
That is a special effect that was very, very common at this time because everybody went to ILM for it. Everybody used it. Ghostbusters used it. It's in everything, particularly anything that Spielberg or George Lucas had their hands on.
Well, I like it. I think it just looks fake.
Yeah. I don't think it ever really looked real to begin with. Like clouds do not look like that. They don't move like that. But if you want to make them look scary, you want to look scary and shit, like a cloud tank will do it.
Did we establish how that tree got there? Like later on, we see the developments that are completely raised ground. This house is supposedly newish. How is there this giant tree in their yard?
I know. I think he says something like, "Yeah, it's an old tree, and it's." And now,
but the whole premise of this is like they got rid of everything and built houses.
Well, I know. Well, so really, what they needed was a nasty, monstrous-looking tree to for this really awesome scene.
I understand. Yeah, I understand why it's there. It's because they wanted it to be there.
But I think it also serves the purpose of when Robbie is talking about it, he is essentially saying, "I want this tree to go away."
I don't blame him.
What Coach is telling him is, the tree's been here for a really long time. We just kind of have to live with the tree. And again, it's that idea of like, you can't just plow everything under because you don't want it around anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that's kind of what happens with the bird, because right after they bury the bird, she says, "Can I have a goldfish now?" And it feels a little bit like a commentary on this idea of like, well, we mourned. Now, can I get something else new and exciting?
Yeah.
And like, I think there's just a lot of little touches like that.
All right.
But I can't.
I'm back to Team Tree. Robbie versus tree. Robbie versus tree. Team tree.
Yeah, I like the tree more than I like Robbie.
Yeah. So
though that kid is like a 100% American child. He's got like the big teeth that just kind of like stick out in the front.
The bowl haircut. Yep.
Oh yeah. So that night, Robbie and Carol Ann get ready for bed as the storm rolls in. The lightning causes the tree outside the window to cast scary shadows on the wall. The lightning flashes make it look like the knots of the tree have faces. Also featured in their bedroom is a clown toy that is the single most terrifying toy that I could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
You'll get no argument.
No. In their room, Steve and Diane roll joints and get high while watching A Guy Named Joe, one of Spielberg's favorite movies. A movie that he remade in 1989, as always.
I was most troubled by all of the seeds from the shitty weed
covering
the end of the bed. I was like, you're going to have seeds in your bed forever.
Shakiest, nastiest weed. It probably cost like $25 an ounce. Good. Yeah. So, yeah, Steve reads a biography of Ronald Reagan, which is really too bad because I kind of like him.
Well, what I really liked about this point is that, so Steve they're getting high, he's reading the book, but he's also watching TV. And then he gets up and does like, he is like the number one dad, America's dad at that point. Like, he's got the dad bod, like he's looking good. He's Craig T. Nelson. Love it.
Yeah. They have some fun dialogue, also worrying if Carol Ann's sleepwalking could be dangerous since there's an empty swimming pool in the backyard. You might call it Chekhov's swimming pool. In his room, the storm keeps Robbie awake. The lightning lights up the awful clown puppet, so he covers it with a jacket so that he doesn't have to look at it. Robbie interrupts.
Jacket has Chewbacca on the back.
Big picture of Chewbacca on the back. There is a huge Star Wars presence in this movie.
Yeah. Between Star Wars and like weird product placement.
Oh my God. You mean the Cheetos bag?
The Cheetos bag, Clue. There's like a couple other ones later on.
Robbie interrupts his parents' good times, so Steve brings him back to his room and explains the sort of counting thunder crashes trick that lets you know if a storm is approaching or moving away.
What I love, though, is when he comes to interrupt them, she takes one more hit from the joint, then puts it out.
Yeah. The kids end up in the parents' bed anyways, so we cut to the middle of the night as the four of them sleep in the same bed, and the network signs off for the night. Carol wakes up again and makes her way to the static of the TV screen. This time there's soft whispering from the set. When Carol Ann reaches out for it, a ghostly hand snaps out at her, following by a wave of spectral energy that zaps the wall over the bed.
And this is where it feels very like Disney's Haunted Mansion.
Yep.
Like it's very wispy looking, and it I don't know, it doesn't quite match the tone of what comes later.
Yeah.
Well, it also, I mean, why? Like, why does it be in the walls? Like, it does. This is the first, like, of a list of things that are like, why is it happening? What is the ghost that's doing that?
I think, see, that's for all our talk about how Steven Spielberg was clearly kind of at least informed, if not entrenched, he doesn't seem very clear on what a poltergeist is versus what a ghost is versus what a demon is versus what a giant dog skeleton is.
Right. This movie plays out like a kid telling a story about a haunted house.
Well,
So
you know what
then-
it is?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what it is? It's like when we talked about we did like an X-Files episode recently where they had a real sort of a graphic interface for some forensics tools that they were using, when really they don't look like that. Like, you gotta hauntings, if you were to like do them in the way that, like, you know, fucking ghost hunters do and shit like that, it's really fucking boring, and you're just like listening to static and stuff like that, like really closely to see if maybe it sounds like something saying a word. Like, you gotta really give it some jazz if you want to make the movie interesting.
Yeah, I just think it's like, well, why is it shooting why? First of all, why does it have a laser at all? Why is it shooting it into the wall?
Right.
Why does Diane look directly at the wall and never notice there's a hole in it now?
Because ghost lasers, man, that's why.
Yeah, go ahead.
Nope, you shoot.
Oh, I was just gonna say, again, I always say I love this movie. I think it's fun, but it's like, upon further review, it really is like Steven Spielberg, not known for horror, known for fantasy, known for fantastical, but not known for horror. And not that horror has to have, like, I'll argue with the movie ends twice. Like, I don't believe that is a thing that has to happen or not happen because Vincent Canby said so. But it helps. I think people that don't like horror, that didn't like this movie, are keying into something that is a true weakness of this movie, which is there's no logic to it. There's literally no logic to what's happening in this house other than, quote, it's a haunted house. But then later they're like, it's an entity. And then later it's like, it's a bunch of ghosts. And I'm sorry to spoil our point by point, plot synopsis. But I think that's a legitimate critique of this film that and I think a lot of people who this film imprinted on are willing to look beyond to enjoy the film.
Yeah, that happens to us a lot when we dig into movies that we have previously or historically really liked or loved. When you look at them, when you do sort of a critical analysis of it, it's like, oh, this movie doesn't make any sense. Or like from a perspective of like a narrative structure, like this is garbage.
Yeah.
Where was Jason all that time? For example.
Oh God, like when we did The Hitcher. Jesus Christ.
Oh.
Yeah. So when her parents wake up, Carol Ann utters one of the iconic phrases of horror, "They're here." So in the morning, it turns out that it was an earthquake in the night that happened. The kids have breakfast before school. Mom asks Carol Ann who she was talking to. The TV people, of course. Mm-hmm. And then, and then Robbie's glass mysteriously breaks from the bottom out suddenly.
So the part with the glass, and then when he picks up the utensils and they're all twisted up, that feels like something that was lifted right from the Night Sky script.
Okay, yeah.
Because Night Skies was supposed to be more or less a sequel to
Close
Encounters, and then they mostly used that as they adapted that into E.T., but some of it ended up in this, and that feels like one of the things that did.
Right, because also the bent silverware thing was also, you were starting to see a lot of that because of Uri Geller.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
and the Amazing Randy.
The Amazing Randy. Good God, what a bummer that guy could be.
Yeah.
Yep. So amid the chaos, Carol Ann goes to the kitchen TV, turns it into a static station.
Watching Gene Shalit.
Gene
Shalit looking his most shallity.
Also, it seems like a very deliberate quality to have a TV like in every room of the house, because like televisions were still kind of expensive back then.
Well, again, that's what I'm saying is like this is it's about consumerism. It's about this life that is supposed to be modern, thoroughly modern, and sort of void of all the troubles of the past.
Yeah.
And the problem is that you obviously can't get rid of those things, especially when you build your house right on top of them.
Yep. They literally burst through the floor.
I mean, we see, because again, when they're the construction people or whatever the fuck they're called are outside and they're running the, what is it, bulldozer, I guess?
Yeah.
Cat? I don't know what that
You're
thing
so
is.
gay. You're really gay right now.
It's true. It's true.
The people who do the wood things, I don't know.
Earlier today, someone asked me something about football, and I was like, you mean that's the one with the groups of men on TV, right? But you see they're plowing through the earth, and you see Tweety's kind of casket, for lack of a better term, gets bulldozed up, and it's like, again, they're really hammering this shit home to us.
Yeah. So now Dana goes out to go to school, and the pool workers catcall her. That's Sunny. Sunny
Diane
Landham.
watches happily with a smile as the construction workers sexually harass her teenage daughter.
Yep, that's Sunny Landham doing all that nasty shit, by the way, the dude from Predator. So upstairs, the dog is freaking out in the parents' bedroom, barking frantically at the burn in the wall that the ghosts left in the night. In the kitchen, the chairs around the table, which were previously pushed in, are now out from the table considerably. Diane sets them back, turns away to get something from under the counter, but when she returns, the chairs are now stacked on the table.
As a single shot.
Yep. Like, they turned away, and
amazing.
the production crew grabbed the chairs and stacked them while they
Well,
were
they
turned
were
away.
they're all one piece. So
Oh, God,
glued or
okay.
screwed together, but they still had to sneak in there.
That's a tough move. Right. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
it's kind of like how they did that in that tracking shot at the beginning of Halloween. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Like he was just like, if you could see everybody off camera, it's just like nothing but people running around the room.
And Jo Beth Williams, hero of the movie, sells it, right? Like, because she's literally has to like ignore the fact that an entire crew of people are like switching out the other chairs and putting in the chairs, and then react as if she hasn't seen it. The simplest shot in the world, and yet possibly one of the most effective in the movie. Like the first true sort of scare in the film.
Yep. She asked Carol Ann if it was the TV people. So now when Steve returns from a day of work, selling more of these cookie cutter houses, Diane excitedly beckons him into the house to show him the kitchen, which is marked up with circles and arrows. She sets a chair in one circle, and after a moment, it shakes in place and then slides across the floor to another circle at the other end of the kitchen. Steve inspects the chair while Diane puts a helmet on Carol Ann, puts her in the circle, then she slides down the kitchen the same way. Steve is stunned.
Mother of the Year. The fact
I love
that
it because
Mother of the Year.
She put a helmet on her.
I love that scene.
Yeah.
Because you don't expect that unless you've seen the movie before. Right. You do not expect this to happen. I also love her reaction when the chair goes across the scene where she's like leaping around like so excited.
Right. And as an audience who's used to like, oh no, she's crazy, the fact that it actually happens in front of their face is actually kind of groundbreaking in this film. Because what they do is they don't make anybody seem crazy. They don't make anybody have to convince somebody and that person not be convinced, and then later they are convinced, if that makes sense. It happens how it would logically happen, which I think is really great.
Well, right. It allows them to sidestep that kind of tired trope of the man not believing the woman, which would have then affected their relationship. It would have affected how we view their relationship. So by having it happen in front of him, we don't get that like, oh, you're crazy. Right. He's pretty much on board. Like he kind of starts in with like I'm the man, I'll solve the problem, I'll call somebody. But even that, he kind of abandons it pretty quickly. And they're just kind of on board together from that point.
Yeah.
They go next door to the neighbor's house to ask if anything weird is going on. I don't understand what the deal with the mosquitoes is, though.
So, are they supposed to be high? Because they seem like they are.
He seems real high. Yeah.
But it's like they're either high or they feel very awkward about what they're asking, but it feels so unnatural. Like, it's like nobody would act like this, especially in front of someone who you do not like.
Also, it's a scene that really doesn't amount to much.
No.
You know?
It just involves the neighbors so later on they can be around to
I guess
assist later.
Yeah.
And it's a contrast too, because like their kid is like kind of slobby looking, and he's very much like he's the antithesis of the kind of all American, Freeling kids.
Yeah. I think also it's another one of those things that would really happen, right? Like if your house is weird or whatever, you would possibly go talk to your neighbors, as opposed to these very claustrophobic movies that we have now that are all in one location and with a limited cast, and they're all sort of dealing with it. This implicates the rest of the world as well.
I would tell everybody. I would go up and down the street.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd be like,
I'd be out there with pots and pans being like, come to my house, I need help.
Yeah. So another storm rolls through, getting more intense until the window suddenly breaks in Robbie's room. And 2 tree-like arms reach in and pull him out.
You can hear the tree roaring.
Yep.
Which I think is awesome.
Team tree.
Yeah.
Yep.
Outside, there appears to be a tornado nearing the house.
That is not awesome.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the closet door in their room opens and a bright light is within. Steve runs out, climbs the tree to pull Robbie out of what appears to be the tree's mouth. In their room, everything is suddenly drawn to the closet. Carol Ann has pulled off of her bed and ultimately sucked inside the closet, which closes suddenly.
So much glitter. Why do they have so much glitter? It is like Studio 54 in there. There's just gold dust flying everywhere.
Oh my God. It must have been impossible to clean that set.
The herpes of set design, glitter.
That's how you get mesothelioma.
Yep. When Steve pulls Robbie out of the tree is suddenly sucked up out of the ground and into the tornado.
Take that, fucking tree.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. When they go into the house, they find that Carol Ann is missing, like gone. They search everywhere, but they can't find her. Diane panics, thinking that she fell into the swimming pool, so they go search, but they find nothing there. Inside, Robbie hears Carol Ann calling to him from the TV with a strangely affected voice. And the way that kid freaks out really gets under my skin a little bit. I find his reaction to be kind of authentic. Like, if something like this were to truly happen to you, you would lose your fucking mind.
I believe him. There are 2 other reactions that I absolutely think they need to reel it in.
Okay.
So when Dominic Dunn, so the next scene in the morning, when like the investigators show up, she's like curled up in a chair with her like hands on the side of her head, weeping hysterically and like rocking back and forth like she's having a nervous breakdown.
Yeah. Okay. I'm with you on that one.
I feel, though, if you just almost got eaten by a tree that got sucked into a tornado, I don't know, maybe you're hysterical. Like, I feel like we should allow this 8-year-old kid his hysteria.
Fine. He can have it. Yeah. He can have it.
No, yeah, but like presented with the impossible, it just, you melt. You just completely go nuts.
This is also where I think there's evidence of Steven Spielberg's hand because, of course, directing kids, like one of his specialties. Mm-hmm. So if this moment was a bit overplayed, everything with Heather O'Rourke feels very Drew Barrymore. You know what I mean? It feels very...
Oh, God, yeah.
Well, I think Drew Barrymore was was up for this role.
Right.
And she ended up in E.T. instead.
Oh, no shit. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's I think all the stuff with the kids, because something tells me Tobe Hooper's not great with kids.
Right.
I just get that feeling. I don't know.
Well, he killed him in Salem's Lot, right?
Oh, my God. I can't remember which of the Richards sisters is in Eaten Alive, but she spends like 90% of the movie like under the house, like running.
Kyle Richards.
Yeah, fleeing from an alligator, like the entire movie. So, yeah.
And you know, Tobe Hooper's like, alligator, come on.
Yeah. Steve visits a paranormal lab at a nearby university. He's not looking too good. His eyes are dark and he mostly mutters.
This is why I find the reactions and the way that the family is framed a little bit strange, because Steven looks like he hasn't slept in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
He looks like he's losing his mind. Diane at times has a smile on her face, and I don't know if we're supposed to read that as like she's the mother, she has to kind of put up this front. But this is a movie made by men, so I'm guessing it's not that. It just feels like everybody's sort of inconsistent.
Okay.
Dominic Dunn is melting in the chair into a pile of screams.
Yeah.
I wonder if her reaction is the people pleaser, sort of like, please believe us, we're not crazy. Like she's trying to present like, I am a normal person who's trying to tell you.
That was my thought.
Yeah.
Because she does this a couple times where like, you know, he looks like he's completely haunted and dying. And she's just sort of like, I'll serve you some coffee because someone has to do it.
Yeah. I think one of the things is she believes it, right? Like she is firm and comfortable in her belief of what's happening. So she's not unbelieving. She's not shocked. She's like task oriented. Here's the next thing that has to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
The movie does sort of hew to standard gender roles in that way, where it's like the mother still has to kind of keep on and make sure everything is in order. And, the father doesn't do the typical, I'll solve the problem thing. But
Right. Well, like, to
does.
your point, in that previous scene where they go talk to the neighbors, Steve is pushed forward. He can't get it out. She's
Right.
standing behind him and is like, hey, our house is haunted. What's going on with yours? Like, she,
Right.
so.
And he says, like, why did you do that? And she was like, well, someone had to say something. We couldn't keep standing there.
Yeah. At their house, Steve gives the investigators a tour of the house, bringing them up to Carol Ann's room, which has been kept locked since the event.
Oh, yeah, because she says, the Thelma Moss says, where was she playing when she disappeared? And I thought it was weird because she wasn't playing. She was in bed.
Yeah.
Right.
So, the investigators brag about an event that they captured on tape where a child's toy moved 7 feet on its own across the floor. It took 7 hours. Steve opens the door to Carol Ann's room and reveals a whirlwind of ghostly chaos.
And the look on his face when he's listening to this story is incredible. Is perfect.
Yeah.
Because he's just kind of like, yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's just music and laughing and just shit flying all over the place. In the kitchen, the investigators are shook by what they've seen. They explain that this is likely a poltergeist, a period of violent spectral activity that's usually connected to a single person. It can stop and start at any time, putting a timer on rescuing Carol Ann. Then there's like strange flashes and electrical stuff that's happening as they talk and objects move on their own.
I forgot to mention, this story is partially based on a true-ish story on the Seaford, Long Island, the House of Flying Objects.
Oh, all right.
It was sort of the first modern, American supernatural investigation.
Okay.
It was William Roll, and I can't remember the other guy's name.
The shot of the family when the coffee pot moves across the table, I think, is just genius because they don't react.
I know. I love it that it's only been it's not really clear how long it's been since Carol Ann has been missing, but they have clearly acclimated to this crazy shit that's happening around them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, she also, every now and then she'll be like, oh, yeah, it'll happen 2 more times.
Yep. Then they turn on the TV, call out to Carol Ann to demonstrate the effect while the investigators watch. It takes a while for her to respond, but she does, telling everyone that there's a bright light there and that she's afraid of it. Dr. Lesh, the lead investigator, advises her to stay away from the light and that she's not alone. There's someone there with her. Suddenly, lights flash on the ceiling, and a rain of objects apport into the room from nowhere. Carol Ann's voice seems to travel across the room, disappearing upstairs. Diane goes to chase her when she's suddenly struck by a wind, and she can smell Carol Ann on her clothes, but it's followed by a thud and a sudden electrical burst.
And dear God, this is where there's a many points in this movie that really teeter on the edge of schmaltzy. They don't quite tip over, but this is one of the ones. I'm not precious about children. I've made that very clear. And I'm sentimental, but not in this way. And so when I see this, I'm just like, Jesus Christ, come on. When she's going from person to person, smell my clothes. I don't know. I don't have kids. Maybe if I'd feel different if I did, but it's just, to me, it's okay, lady.
I actually bought it. I actually think this is one of her amazing
I think
moments.
she's good. She sells it, but to me, I'm just all right, wrap it up, kids.
This is also where the movie starts getting really confusing as to the intention of the spirits, demons, what have you. So they've got Carol Ann, but they give all this stuff back apparently from other dead people or whatever. Again, what's happening in this house? Also, why do they need the girl? Why do they need her?
I think that he says that, I don't really remember where. So some of this is Night Skies and some of it is various pieces. Is this Seaford, Long Island thing?
I was about to say, this is a real grab bag of paranormal activity.
This is a Twilight Zone episode. The episode is called Little Girl Lost.
That's right. It's a William Matheson episode, isn't it?
Yep.
But in that one, she's not kidnapped. She just falls into the fourth dimension.
Or as they would say, Selma and Patty say in The Simpsons, maybe he disappeared into fat air.
Marge, I'm somewhere where I don't know where I am.
Don't know where I am.
Do you see towels?
If it's towels, you're in the linen closet again.
One of the investigators comes downstairs complaining that some unseen force bit him. When he lifts his shirt, there's a massive bruise and huge teeth marks on him.
I guess it's the beast.
Yep. Yeah, so by night, the investigators brainstorm over where the sounds are coming from and that the spot that the apportation happened at might be a way out of wherever Carol Ann is. Dr. Lesh talks to Robbie about, he's one of the investigators, he's the brother, right? About why some people stick around a place and haunt it after they die. And then we get a really close-up shot of a bag of Cheetos. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the investigators, Marty, excuses himself to the kitchen to get something to eat.
Look, what kind of savage just goes into a stranger's kitchen and helps themselves to the food?
He pulls an entire steak out.
Yeah, not anything. It's middle of the night. He's going to cook a 10-ounce ribeye for himself that he just tosses on the counter without a plate.
Yeah.
He deserves to have his face ripped off.
Yeah. It comes to life suddenly as he watches it. The steak on the counter crawls across before suddenly erupting into a mountain of ground meat and nasty shit. Then he drops the chicken drumstick he's been eating on the floor and hits it with the flashlight, revealing it to be crawling with maggots.
It's a pretty cool moment. I think it holds up.
I do. Yeah, it is pretty great.
Possibly the biggest reaction when I saw it as a kid. Like,
yep.
gross.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Right. Because this is leading up to a like, this is like a real 1-2 punch for like 10-year-old me to be freaked out. His revulsion drives him into the bathroom where he eagerly spits it all out in the sink. But then the light overhead turns hot. I think it's one of those heat lamps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It blisters his face, which bleeds. Then he picks at a sore on his face, peeling away the skin, tearing whole pieces of his face off until he tears his entire face off.
And those are Spielberg's hands doing that.
Oh, awesome. Yeah,
they had one shot to get this right because it was so expensive.
Yeah.
And so he was like, I'm going to do it. Nobody else is going to do it.
Yeah. Yep. So, then the light flashes again and he's fine.
Right.
This one, I think, looks less good in 4K. I think conceptually it's gross and kind of gnarly.
But it's an 82 special effect for sure. Yeah.
It's one of those, like, real hands, fake head, use as much of the real person as possible, Tom Savini, philosophy, which never works because you can't get the arms in the place where they need to be. So it's like, not that anybody can see me right now, but it's like this, tearing,
And there's like a noticeable difference in color and texture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's like your face looks waxy and sort of like a summer squash.
Right. Had this been a teenager with a complexion problem, I would have as I did have at the time, I would have completely signed on for this moment. But even when I saw it as a kid,
missed opportunity.
Right,
they could have Dana rip her face off. She's not doing anything else.
Yep. So now out in the living room, the electronic surveillance equipment springs to life, measuring some anomalous activity. The camera is drawn to the steps as a series of flashes erupt from out of nowhere. The door to the kids' room opens up ominously. Everyone wakes up as a swirling energy makes its way down the steps. A shape appearing to be a woman presents itself to the Freelings before dissipating.
It's some more Magical World of Disney shit.
Yeah. When they run the tape...
Haunted Mansion.
Yeah.
When they run the tape back, they see much, much more. There's a parade of ghosts coming down the steps. This is one of my all-time favorite effect shots of the 80s. It is incredibly spooky.
Okay.
That's all right. It's fine.
I fucking love it because the way that they do it is, that's the actors that are the ghosts are like holding a light about like waist high, and they're just projecting like the reflection of the lights and not the actual actors. It's got a really weird otherworldly like look about it. I just think it's incredibly strange.
It's also a great example of a practical in-camera effect, right? Like they're actual actors doing it. Today it would be CG.
Yep.
And, classic matte type effect.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the next day, the Freelings send Robbie off to his grandmother's, just throw him in a cab.
In what is probably the weirdest moment of the movie where they're like, well, they call the cab for him, and they're just sort of standing on the lawn while this little boy goes and gets into the cab with the dog. And then all she says is, call me, okay?
Right.
Like, they didn't put him in the cab. They didn't walk over. They didn't wave to him. It's just like, all right, text me when you get there, I guess.
Yeah.
Or don't. Whatever.
So Dr. Lesh is leaving for a bit. She's taking the artifacts and the tapes back to the lab for analysis. Steve's boss pays him a visit. It's our friend James Karen. He hasn't been to work for a while. Steve does his best to distract his boss from seeing all the spectral shit happening around the house.
And James Caan he's like even smarmy in this. Like he just has this smarminess to him that is so perfect in everything.
So Diane, meanwhile, attempts to open Carol Ann's door, but the sudden torrent of chaos and noise forces her to shut it in a second. And outside at the job site, Teague, Steve's boss, offers him a newer, better house. He's worried that he's losing his best salesman and came to sweeten their deal to keep him around. It's revealed that the new development will be cut into a sprawling cemetery, which will be relocated just like they did with the plot of land that Steve's house lies on. And this is the first time that he's like, wait a second, what?
Now, this is also where people get confused about this one a lot because they think that I think they're kind of like blending the second one of this with like Pet Cemetery and other sort of the Indian burial ground trope that's very popular in the 80s. Because what he says here is it's not ancient tribal burial ground. It's just people.
Yeah, it's just regular people.
Which is interesting because it's like, well, Native people are also people.
How
but
forward
that's that
thinking
idea.
of you.
That's that idea again of like, people are starting to realize, oh, you can't just dig up bodies and toss them aside, even if they've been there for 700 years or whatever, because that's kind of right. It's on people's minds at the time.
Yep. So when
I have
Dr.
more
Lesh-
to say about this when we get to the swimming pool scene.
Okay. When Dr. Lesh returns, she brings with her a tiny little lady with a funny voice who seems to be a psychic medium named Tangina.
Mm-hmm. And she walks in and says, would y'all mind hanging back? You're jamming my frequencies.
Yeah.
It's so perfect. She's so bizarre.
I know.
She has like these giant tinted glasses on.
Yeah. I am convinced that she is supposed to be Lorraine Warren. Or at least a callback to Lorraine Warren.
I'd buy it.
Yeah. Steve is not having it, and I love this scene, is he mocks her with the whole, like, trying to answer her with his mind. But it turns out that she can pick up on his thoughts, maybe.
She says, I just don't like trick answers.
So that night, Tangina explains what's happening to the house, that Carol Ann is alive and okay, but there is a threat there. This is one of my favorite monologues, too. This is another, like, moment.
Oh, is this it was strong enough to punch a hole into this world?
Yeah.
There is no death. It is only a transition to a different sphere of consciousness. Carol Ann is not like those she's with. She is a living presence in their spiritual earthbound plane. They're attracted to the one thing about her that is different from themselves. Her life force. It is very strong. It gives off its own illumination. It is a light that implies life and memory of love and home and earthly pleasures. Something they desperately desire but can't have anymore. Right now, she's the closest thing to that. And that is a terrible distraction from the real light that has finally come for them. Do you understand me? These souls, who for whatever reason are not at rest, are also not aware that they have passed on. They're not part of consciousness as we know it. They linger in a perpetual dream state, a nightmare from which they cannot wake. Inside this spectral light is salvation, a window to the next plane. They must pass through this membrane where friends are waiting to guide them to new destinies. Carol Ann must help them cross over, and she will only hear her mother's voice. Now, hold on to yourselves. There's one more thing. A terrible presence is in there with her. So much rage, so much betrayal. I've never sensed anything like it. I don't know what hovers over this house, but it was strong enough to punch a hole into this world, take your dog away from you. It keeps Carol Ann very close to it and away from the spectral light. It lies to her. It says things only a child can understand. It has been using her to restrain the others. To her, it simply is another child. To us, it is the beast.
Why?
I don't know.
Why her?
Well, because her life force, it holds them there, so she has to
Now-
like move them towards the real light.
The thing about this is like, this is a little bit like the Warrens that were kind of like this too, where it's like, you are basically giving me a very, very white Christian version of something, but you're kind of cloaking it in New Age, but like mumbo jumbo. But it's like everything she's saying just sounds like Christianity. It's very odd.
Well, here's the thing. It's a movie made in America, ostensibly for Americans. What else do Americans know?
Well, they're not all Christians.
Well, no, but it is the common fucking theme throughout. Like, or it doesn't matter. It's non-denominational at this point. It's just
But I just think
something
it's
that everybody
interesting that
says.
it's interesting that it's being presented as though she's not. She is of like a different. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. She's kind of new agey. She's not straight up religion.
Yeah.
And yet it's what she's saying is very religious. Because one of the things she says is, would you like if it comes contrary to your belief as a human being and a Christian?
Yeah.
She has a set
It's
of
very
She has a set of knowledge that nobody else has. Where did she get it? Where did it come from? How does she know these things? Is there any? I know we already talked about the cast, but is there any sort of lore about her casting in this film? Because I, quite frankly, think that Beatrice Straight, as much as I like her, is like a non-entity in this film, and they should have just had Zelda Rubinstein the whole time. Like, it doesn't make sense that they introduce her later.
I do like the Dr. Lesh character quite a bit. There's something very, very human about her, like the way that
it feels very unexplored though with the Dr. Lesh character, because like there's clearly something that she's a stand-in. It feels like for somebody else, like a mother character or something.
I think they needed to stretch it out, quite frankly, because Beatrice Straight leaves and Zelda Rubinstein shows up.
Right.
Like it feels like we're just marking time. Like, why didn't we bring in the person with all the answers at the beginning? Like,
like what was she busy?
Right, exactly.
Well, the way that I sort of kind of take this apart is that you can't just slam them into the weirdo. You've got to kind of ease people into it first, you know? So like if they had brought like Tangina Barons out like immediately, it would have been jarring. And so you've got like, cause each one of them has answers that the Freelings need. And so it's just kind of like a graduation to more sort of like outer limits.
Plus, I don't know if you could sustain that character for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Like, that's a lot.
Agreed, but I will say that her function in their short time she's in the movie is a very grounding, comforting. Like, she plays with, Diane's her and Diane's characters together. Interestingly, two women who are like the emotional center of the rest of the movie. I think I just think she's genius casting. Even though she seems like what's the word I'm looking for? Not character, but like novelty casting. She actually does it, and like later in the movie, she's like in the room with like the hurricane winds and everything. So I don't know.
He had said he had always wanted to cast this he wanted a little person for this role specifically, because he said he thought it would be an interesting contrast to have this person who is very small in stature but has a lot of power to them, and it's sort of their power is sort of outsized, whereas their size itself is quite small. And I think that's why when it came to the kind of Hooper Spielberg debate, she stuck so closely with him. I think she really appreciated that he had done that he had given her this chance, because she had said up until then she would get, the things that you would think a little person would get cast in. Right. And this was sort of the first time that someone had taken her seriously as an actor. And I think that's probably why she stuck with him so much.
No, there's a logic to that.
Yeah. But she's interesting too, in that they present this is, I think, maybe goes back to that idea of he might know more than we expect Spielberg to know about this stuff.
Yeah.
In that there's a lot of times, and this I guess maybe is kind of a trope with these types of stories, where you'll get the science people that come in and they basically will say, and this is also what would happen in real life when they would do this, is they would say, look, something is happening here. You're seeing something or you're experiencing something. I can't tell you what it is, and I can't tell you how to get rid of it. Like, that's not what we do. And then, so the family would always sort of be left with like, well, you came in, but you didn't help us. You just sort of told us something, and now you're leaving. Whereas this person comes in and she's like, no, I know exactly what this is, and I can get rid of it for you. So you've got the science people who are like, I can recognize what this is and document it, but we need this other person to come in and help you get rid of it.
I wish that this movie would have been made in the era of prequels, because the Zelda Rubinstein prequel where we
this would have been, James Wan would have spun this off into its own sub franchise. Right. Yeah,
because
which, funny you say that, because the guy who shot this movie, the cinematographer, made a bunch of the Conjuring movies.
Oh God,
interesting. Yeah, I mean, it would be great to see her like doing her job in other places. You know what I mean? Like how she got the knowledge to get to this moment where she's helping them, and how they came to find her, and all of that. I mean, it's fun that it's sort of a mystery in this film, but it would also have been fun to see more of her.
Yeah. So they make a plan to go into the bedroom to get her. It's been a while since they've heard Carol Ann, and it takes some real work to get her to talk again. But now she seems like she's in trouble. When they opened the door to find the closet open and flickering with spectral light, Tangina has Ryan, the investigator, go down to the area where the object's apportated from, and she throws a tennis ball into the closet, and it appears down in the living room covered in ectoplasm.
Gross.
Yeah. Upstairs, they tie a rope around Diane's waist, throw the rope in, which appears dangling from the gate downstairs, and then Diane crosses over while Tangina welcomes the spirits into the light.
This scene is pretty creepy. Because they've got, the shadows on the wall make everything like, they've got these big bright light cast on her. Her hair is like whipping all over her face, and she's sort of shouting. Mm-hmm. And it, again, has that lighting like the fan scene in Funhouse. And there's just something very odd about it. Like, she's not listening to anybody else. And Coach is like yelling at her, and she's just sort of like in her own world. It's a very strange scene. It's really cool.
Yep. Steven panics, starts pulling Diane out, but the rope seems to break, and a massive, monstrous skull emerges from the closet, driving him back. Downstairs, Diane emerges from the gate, falling into the living room with Carol Ann, both covered in spooky junk.
Some good stunt doubles there, gotta tell you.
Yep. They throw them in the tub and clean them off, bringing them back to consciousness. Tangina triumphantly announces, "This house is clean." So sometime later, the Freelings are moving out. Diane has gray streaks in her temples now from being on the other side. Ladies, you got to bring this look back. I love it. We talk about this in Nightmare on Elm Street, too.
Mm-hmm. It's a good look.
Right. What did she say? I look 23 years old or something like that.
Yeah, so my God, I look like I'm 20 years old.
Yeah. Don't you think it looks a little punk?
Mm-hmm.
No. So Steve heads to the office to deal with some business while everyone else resumes their life, while Diane prepares to dye her hair. The kids, meanwhile, get ready for bed. The clown.
Why are they packing everything like in the yard?
I don't know. Yeah, the clown looms menacingly at the end of Robbie's bed. He tries to get some sleep regardless. We get a nice little calm before the storm beat here. And then sometime later, there's a thump in the kids' room, the sound of something moving across the floor. When Robbie looks up, the clown is no longer in the chair. Also, this scene fucking terrified me when I was little. He cautiously checks under the bed but finds nothing, but when he returns upright, the clown is behind him, wrapping his arms around his throat and dragging him under the bed.
And apparently the clown worked so well that it was really choking him.
Oh.
And he was like trying to signal them for help, and they thought he was just like ad-libbing or whatever. And then eventually Spielberg realized what was happening and like ran over and like wrenched it off of him.
And meanwhile, Hooper's like, yes,
more, it was like clown,
more
clown.
Tighter.
Completely unaware, Diane gets ready for bed and then relaxes, but she is suddenly attacked by unseen hands which drive her up the wall and over the ceiling. In our second movie with a rotating room.
I learned today it's called a gimbal set.
Oh, no shit. All right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's basically built on the like a kind of a big wheel.
Yeah.
So it just, people pull it around and roll it around like a big hamster wheel.
Yeah.
Despite what I said earlier, this scene is again obviously shot by men. Like what they put the actor / stunt woman through in that scene is today would probably be considered unconscionable, quite frankly.
Yeah, I mean, she's literally just banging around from wall to wall as they're
in her
shaking
underwear
her around the room.
Yeah,
and I really don't like the fact. I think what bothers me about it is that it has that Spielberg vibe of very sentimentality and family and all this, and then all of a sudden you get this moment, which is very kind of leering. It's the ghost or poltergeist, whatever the fuck it is at this point, is like kind of trying to take her clothes off in a way that's like tone feels.
It is
really
again
weird.
like we mentioned earlier, the Barry Taff, Doris Bither thing. I think that he must have been aware of that case,
Yes,
or maybe he even saw the movie. I don't know, but that is exactly what's happening in this scene. I mean, not exactly, but pretty close. As close as a PG-rated movie can get.
And the movie doesn't support that up to this point. Like, there's danger.
Right.
Kids are in danger. Like, it is, the kid peril. I love the kid peril in this movie because you genuinely, like when Robbie's getting dragged under the bed, like it is genuinely scary. But the quasi-sexual assault, not good.
And it feels like it comes from way out of nowhere. It's like there's never been sexual menace in this movie, and yet all of a sudden there is, and it just doesn't feel right. It feels cheap and kind of like sleazy.
Yeah. So, Robbie manages to get a leg up on the clown and literally tears it to pieces as the closet
beats the shit out of it.
Closet yawns ominously with a bright light within. Diane tries to reach the door, but is driven back by a horrifying ghost creature.
The haunted lion skeleton doesn't do much for me.
I love its look, though. It's so cool. She tumbles down the steps, runs outside looking for help as the closet door tears itself open. Diane suddenly falls into the empty pool in the pouring rain as corpses pop up all around her. Coffins suddenly rising up out of the ground, bodies falling out of them. And she struggles to get back to the yard and eventually makes it when the neighbors suddenly pull her out.
Okay.
Now, Sean, you wanted to talk about the pool?
All right. So they established they'd move the gravestones. They didn't move the graves. How deep do you have to dig to pour a foundation for a house? Deeper than the Native Americans would bury a body. Like they're not burying, but deeper than any graveyard would bury a coffin. They would have hit coffins when they put in the thing. They would have hit,
sure, okay.
Like these coffins aren't like one rainstorm away from popping up from the bottom of a pool. Like that's not how it works in a graveyard. So that
I think you mean from rocketing through the bottom of a pool.
Well, exactly. Yes. Like the implication would be, but I don't think this is what the movie is saying, is that they actually, because Coach, you keep calling him Coach. I finally figured out you were talking about Craig T. Nelson. Coach says, you move the gravestones, you didn't move the bodies, but then do you see what I'm saying? Like the bodies would have buried 6 feet deep. They would have hit the bodies, so they would have had to have moved some bodies. But the implication in the movie is they moved 0 bodies, and now it's raining, and now they're all like popping up because they were like 6.
You're really throwing a wet blanket on a really badass set piece.
Thumbs
and
down.
You built 700 houses, but it's only when you dig this one pool that you find all these bodies.
Exactly, and also apparently they're spring loaded. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like coffin flops from I Think You Should Leave, but in reverse. There's an awesome dolly focus shot of the hallway seeming to extend to a much greater distance. That shot of her sort of trying to get to the kids' room.
And this is that thing. This is the
amazing
vertigo shot. This is what he does. The thing he does in Jaws.
Yeah.
The zoom in and pull back at the same time that Hitchcock sort of perfected.
In Jaws, it's when the kid's getting eaten, right? It's when the kid on the raft is getting eaten.
Yeah.
Yep.
So she throws open the door and is immediately pulled into the gravity of the closet, which is now a pulsing mass of some spooky business.
And there's more glitter just flying all over the room, which is just proof that you will never get rid of that.
Not even the most spectral shit could suck it all out last time.
If the beast's closet can't do it, then nobody can.
Yeah. So she manages to pull the children out as a tendril emerges from the hole in the closet. Steve arrives in time to find shit going crazy. Teague watches, frightened from the car. He tries to get to the house, but coughing.
This is when he screams at them. This is when he does the big, you move the stones without the bodies. But he needs to take about 20% off this scream because he sounds unhinged by the end.
Wouldn't you be, though? I mean, like, your life has been fucking insane for like the last 3 weeks.
The line sounds right, that you moved the stones, but you never moved the bodies. But then he starts just sort of screaming.
Yeah.
Just like wildly screaming.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So when the family escapes the house, they pile into the station wagon, pull away as a corpse erupts from the garage. It's just mayhem in the streets as coffins explode from everywhere, throwing cars aside and knocking shit over. Teague turns toward the house in time to watch it suddenly implode, pulled entirely into the ghostly gate in the closet, leaving nothing but a vacant lot in its way.
And a little bit of glitter.
A little bit of glitter, man. That's another one of my favorite like effect shots from the 80s.
That's pretty cool.
You skipped over the most important part of the film, which is the fact that the dog reappears at the end of the movie and survives. Literally the only character I was concerned about watching this movie was the dog. He gets out.
And Dana comes back.
Right, and we forgot to talk about Dana coming back.
Dana shows up too, and you're like, oh, right, she's in this movie.
Yep, and she has a hickey.
Yeah, there's another line, right? So we kind of breezed past it, but when they're packing, and she's like, oh, we're going to go stay out at the, Holiday Inn or whatever, and she says something like, oh, yeah, I know that place. And it's like, what the fuck is that? Like, this girl is like 16 years old.
Yeah,
all you've done in this movie is imply that she's fat and make her a slut.
Right.
She's just a horny
and then
teenager.
she disappears.
They had to get rid of the young character that could articulate what was going on in the house.
She can't.
Frankly.
She's busy catatonically rocking in a chair.
Right, that's true.
Yep. So when the Freelings are clear, they stay in a Holiday Inn, filing into a single room, exhausted. Steve pushes the TV cart onto the walkway in front of the room. Dolly shot away, roll credits.
It's a cute ending. I'll give it that.
I like that ending.
Yeah.
Yep.
Starts with TV, ends with TV.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, fucking Poltergeist, man. Like I will not. I love it. I won't move on that. I think it's fantastic from start to finish. Just one of the best of the 80s, easily.
I think what's strange about it is that for all its, as I've said a bunch of times now, it is a quintessential 80s movie. And for all of its 80s-ness, it does age pretty well. Mm-hmm. And I think that's that sentimental core to it. Is like, it's not just an 80s horror movie. It is something bigger. It's also a fucking Spielberg movie. So it's, it has that kind of gravitas. It's better than a lot of other movies. But it's weird in that it's so 80s and it relies so heavily on its era that it still works now.
Yeah. I think the film garners a lot of goodwill because it extends goodwill, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. It was a person who was the golden boy of the moment, who could do anything he wanted to do, and he wanted to work in a horror movie. And so he got a horror movie hero to direct that movie when he couldn't. And yes, he may have had a heavy hand creatively, but it feels like the best kind of fan service in the sense that all of these scenes are so disparate, they just don't line up. Like, it's fun to poke holes in it. Like, this would be my favorite, PhD thesis to write about because I love the movie so much, but I also love to dissect it. But the fan service of all these different things, like you have monsters, you have ghosts, you have dead bodies, you got gore, like you've got all the things that horror fans wanted during like one of the best eras of horror ever, and it was from a master studio filmmaker and a master person who created one of the best horror films of all time with $10. And so I think that it's a perfect sort of storm of events that has created a movie that is so assailable that is yet unassailable, which I love about it.
I think you're pretty on point with that. Like, one of the reasons I will continuously watch Rob Zombie's awful movies is that they're so obviously made by someone who loves this genre. in a way that is so genuine that I'm charmed by it. So I'm like, you can keep cranking out the dumbest shit in the world, and every single time I'm gonna give it a shot because I know you care so much about this, and you want other people to care as much as you do, and you want to share that with them, and that counts for a lot with me.
Is Rob Zombie the Steven Spielberg of horror?
Oh, stop it.
No. John Carpenter is the Steven Spielberg of horror.
I don't know. John Carpenter is a really, really grouchy guy with a lot of bitterness. I don't see that, but
John Carpenter's great. Just don't talk to him. Like, just don't ask him any questions, and you can have a love affair with John Carpenter.
You're gonna get, that's a stupid question. Who are you?
Yeah.
Please, I was at Comic-Con for the Ghosts of Mars panel that he was 45 minutes late for, and it was like, oh boy, legendarily terrible. Thank goodness we didn't all have phones to record it.
Oh man.
Yeah. I had a really great time with this one.
That's a good one.
I cherish any excuse to examine the Poltergeist legacy. That being said, Dave, we're coming up on our final movie of spooky season, aren't we?
We are going to be wrapping up our heavy hitters month with the least heavy of the bunch. Halloween 3 Season of the Witch.
Yep. Oh god.
Now,
we capped off spooky season with Halloween.
Listen, I had to choose something, and we watched Halloween for last year.
Meaning we watched a Halloween movie called Halloween for every week of spooky season last year.
Yeah, and so I'm not going to sit through Halloween 2 because that movie's not good. And Halloween 3 is a fun movie.
Yep, it certainly is. You know, I watched it just recently, like in the last couple of months, and we've got some guests who we're going to have a lot of fun with talking about that one. It's totally a weird-ass movie. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, cool. Sean, thank you so much for joining us.
This was so fun. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate this. I am such a fan anyway, and I love doing the deep dives. And oh my God, I was like racing to catch up when you're mentioning all these like paranormal investigators and stuff. I'm like, holy shit, I thought I prepared. But thank you for having me. This was the best.
Yeah. What do you got? You got anything you want to plug?
Do I ever? Well, of course, Queer Horror, a Film Guide, a book that I created and co-edited and wrote with 7 other writers, came out recently. We're really proud of it. 900 plus horror films that have queer content in them. Also, if you want a copy that's cheaper than retail, just reach out to me on social media. I can hook you up because I feel like the price of the book is too high. The price of the horror book is too high. Also, I'm Gay of the Dead everywhere, so you can find me on all the social medias, but most importantly on my Patreon, where I'm rolling out my next book, which is a series of interviews with LGBTQ directors working in horror. And by the time it's done, it'll be an actual book, and there's like 50 interviews like on deck for that. So yeah, those are the 2 things. Find me at Gay of the Dead.
Awesome. Yeah. Once again, thank you so much. And be back next week as we cap it all off with Halloween 3.
Heavy hitter.